So good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our board meeting held in public this morning. We have got a lot on the agenda today, so we're going to move at pace, as well as making sure we have a good discussion. Can I also welcome members of the public who may be joining on MS Teams, and then just remind us all that the meeting is live streamed and there will be a copy placed on our YouTube channel. We have got the feature of subtitles, and those can be accessed by members of the public clicking on the screen. I think we're all pretty well used to our etiquette for these meetings now, but we are doing our best. We'll use the chat function to indicate that we want to speak. We'll keep our microphones mute if we're not speaking. I'm happy that colleagues are well aware of trying to make brief introductions to papers, and then questions will be taken after the introduction. I will try to cluster the questions. For members of the public, any questions that you would like to raise, just do so using the question and answer function, and they will be reviewed by our company secretary as per the protocol. There'll be 15 minutes available at item 21 in order to take questions. And if I could say again, we really are grateful for your attendance and for the questions that you ask. It's great. We've recently been complimented on how many members of the public and our staff join us. So thank you for that. We've got I think we may be a national first in that. I don't have any starred items, requests for questions on the starred items at 19. So we'll just take those as read when we get to the time. We are hoping to conclude by approximately 10 to 1:45. So let's see how we get on, but there will be a break in between. So coming to item 2, are there any declarations of interest from members of the public? Members of the board. Okay, thank you. And also I have omitted to accept apologies. We do have apologies today from Isabel Down, who's a non-exec director, Nina Kara, who's a non-exec director, and Jane Wills, who's an associate non-exec director. The registered board members' interest is available on our website under Your Trust Board and can be accessed there. So bringing us to the minutes of the previous board meeting held on the 3rd of March and also the extraordinary board on the 29th of March. I'm going to assume colleagues have read these minutes. Would anybody like to raise any matter of material accuracy or any other matter? No? Okay, thank you. That brings us to the action log. Does anyone have questions on the action log? It has been updated appropriately. Thank you. Then we come to our service story, and I think people are aware that we do always have a service story, a patient or a staff story. And on this occasion, I'm going to invite Kim to introduce an item which helps us reflect on the services for people who have palliative or end-of-life care. So Kim, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a real timely event because this week is about how we look after both our patients and their loved ones during the last moments of their life. So the support campaign aims to raise awareness of the things that staff can do to make the relative experience a little easier. So this is holistic family or broader care for our patients as they reach the end of their life. Leaflets have been developed and they are being given to relatives whose loved ones are approaching the end of life, and they highlight all of the things that we can do and they should expect us to do whilst their loved ones are in our care. It includes free parking, food vouchers, additional blankets, toiletries, and that's really, really important because we're trying to enable people to speak out and do as much. We want to do as much to support them as we're supporting their loved ones. So our team are working hard. There's many events happening over this week. They're delighted that the board story falls during this week as well, which will give that additional highlighting. And most importantly, our staff are appreciative of the board's support for this very, very difficult part of our community's lives. A QR code has also been added to the leaflet, and our patients and their loved ones will be able to see this video, but most importantly as well, it's part of the Butterfly Cornwall scheme and will further highlight. So on that note, I shall hand over to Pete to play the video. Thank you.
Here at RCHT, we are so proud of the services we provide for our patients with palliative and end-of-life care, but fully recognise behind each patient there is a family that worry and are deeply concerned, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we look after both patient and their families. The last 2 years have been extremely difficult, and as we come out of the pandemic, we want to make sure that we continue to give that service both to patients and their loved ones. Here we do ask for opinion, but we want to make sure that each voice is heard and that we learn lessons and make the changes that support the family during an extremely difficult time.
I support by leading a programme focused on constantly improving end-of-life care for our patients and those important to them. I want to support our staff to appreciate the importance of communicating well and delivering the highest standard of care to patients and their families. We want to get it right every time.
Hi, I'm Todd, and I support my patients by listening to them and communicating effectively to find out what their needs are and to support them in the best possible way in a hospital environment at the end of their life.
My name is Nikki, and I provide support by being compassionate and empathetic to my patients and their relatives because they are just as important.
My name is Amy, and I'm a speech and language therapist. I support people communicating their needs, wishes and feelings towards the end of their life.
I support.
I support.
I support.
I support.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the chaplains. Our role is to support patients and their families and our staff colleagues in some of the darkest and most difficult times of life. We listen, we care, we come alongside. We're often present on the journey. We're there 24 hours a day. We're there for you.
Hi, my name's Claire. I support patients and their families by providing refreshments in a friendly and supportive environment and lending a listening ear if they want to chat.
My name is Sanjeev. I'm an acute physician and I work in the emergency department and the acute medical unit of the Royal Cornwall Hospital. So many times I see people who are towards the end of life, in the end of life. Many times it has happened very quickly, and families of the patients and the patients themselves have found it very difficult to understand what's going on. And what I do is try and support them, be as compassionate and sensitive, listen to them. Listening, I think, is the most important thing, and it's something that we try and train our trainees to do as well. Because being compassionate and being a good listener and breaking bad news as compassionately as possible, I think, is an important part of a job.
Hi, I'm Liz. I support by recognising the needs of the friends and families of patients. I also support staff via education to enable them to provide the highest standards of care to our patients and families.
I support.
I support.
I support.
I support.
Hi, I'm Nikki, and I provide a safe place and a listening ear for relatives and patients.
We're here to support you with your spiritual needs as well, caring for you and your family and your loved ones as a whole person. Whether you have a faith or no faith, we can support you. We're available all the time, so we're here when you need us.
Hi, I'm Sonia. I support the welfare of patients and their relatives as well. I look after them, I try to feed them, give them nice lollies and things to refresh them. I also like to look after the relatives because I feel it's important that they're looked after and treated nicely as well, and do all I can to help them while they're there, because it's, you know, the memory they take home with them, to look after them as well as their relative or loved one.
Hi, I'm Danny and I'm an occupational therapist. I support patients at their end of a life to go home from hospital by completing a range of holistic assessments to ensure they have the right equipment and support at home.
I support.
I support.
I support.
I support.
My name is Michael Thomas. I'm the lead nurse for a team that cares for newly diagnosed patients with a non-curative cancer diagnosis. We work in a proactive and rehabilitative way, empowering the patients to make decisions and to remain in control of their uncertain journey. We dovetail with other services such as specialist palliative care, but our main role is to work with those patients at the beginning of that bridge, at the beginning of that crossover, and often we may be enabling them and helping them to complete their advanced care plan for their future care.
Hello, my name is Lorna. I'm a part of the physiotherapy team. I support while patients are in hospital to maintain their mobility and maintain their strength while they are unwell.
I support and work with patients to enable good symptom control and good sharing of information about their illness and their treatment options, so they're able to consider what really matters, what's important to them as they approach the end of their lives. I support and work with teams and clinicians to work in this way too.
I support.
I support.
I support.
We fully recognise we do not always get this right, both for the patient or their family, and most importantly how we support and educate and develop our staff to be able to deal with difficult situations that mean that the patient and their family get the right outcome.
So really powerful commitment from our staff and our board. So Dying Matters Week is this week, and I urge everyone to support this very, very difficult time of both our patients and their loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. And you know, if that video, as I know it is an example of the kind of care and support, then it comes across really, really strongly. I just want to thank everybody, because it isn't easy, is it, making videos, and the compassion and their genuine ability to do such a great job is there too. And you say supporting our patients and their families, but also I know we support our staff in this, and the board is more than pleased to do that. It's great that we've got the opportunity this week to celebrate with them the work that they do. And as one of the speakers said, the way we treat families during this time, as well as the way we treat patients, just lives on with us, doesn't it? And those experiences can be, even though it's a sad time, can still be a positive experience. There may be comments people would like to make, but perhaps before we do, I could just refer to that wonderful butterfly project that you mentioned right at the beginning. I think perhaps Steve, as our new chief exec, or not so new anymore, won't know that we had the site decorated in beautifully knitted and crocheted butterflies a year or 2 years ago, I think it was, Kim, and that was again an example of how much people care. So colleagues, I know you are putting some lovely comments on the screen. I'll pick out some to read so that people can see them. Video brilliantly put together by Hannah, thank you. How very moving. It was a brilliant wraparound, multi-professional, compassionate and passionate care. Great video, thank you, and really good to see such a wide range of people. So the very positive comments, thank you, board. Would anybody like to raise a particular point with Kim or ask any question? I can't see you, so you'll have to press your button if you need to. I think, Kim, probably we've got the comments in our chat there, and for members of the public and staff who are watching us, there's such positive comments. and Steve putting one there about we have an amazing, compassionate team. Thank you. It is an amazing field of work to be involved in, and in many ways I think it's a great privilege. And so if we could, through you, Kim, send our thanks to everybody, also to the families and people themselves, because it is such an important time of life. And I genuinely feel proud, and I think everybody should feel proud of that, the video and the work that we've seen.
I will pass your thanks on, Chair. I think it's well worth us reflecting that it was, what, 3-4 years ago that this service was found to be inadequate, and the incredible work that they now do and promote. And I will pass my thanks on both to the team and our multi-professional teams that support them. Thank you.
It's a lovely note on which to end this part, actually, Kim, because it is such a multi-professional effort, isn't it? Everybody is needed and everybody counts, including family members. So that's what it is. Well, board, thank you very much for that. Really, in a sad way, but quite uplifting to the start of our morning. That then brings me to my report at item 6. I'm not going to repeat any of it, other than to say in section 3, the newly updated terms of reference of the committees are not on the website today, but they will be there by Monday as a result of some of the conversations that we've had together to go on improving. The only thing that I would pull out of my report is the thanks to everyone, and it is to citizens and staff and families, because we all now know what a tough time the NHS is having, but the NHS in Cornwall also. And it just makes a difference that people are doing their best only to use services when they are in acute need. And I think the other thing I would reflect in thanks is thanks to the neighbours and friends who support people at home and help families manage issues at home. So unless there are any questions on my report, and I don't think so, no, I'll come on to item 7, which is our Chief Executive's report. I'm going to take this item in 2 parts, because we've got a lovely task to undertake. And so I'm going to take the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding first, and then come on to the second part of Steve's report, if I may. Could we confirm whether we have Professor Emma Hunt and Drummond Masterton here with us now?
Chair, I can see that Drummond is online, and I'm just asking Emma's EA if she could join the meeting now. So if you just bear with me just for 1 minute, I'll try and get her online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think because we're all so keen to manage time well this morning, we're actually a little bit ahead of ourselves. So I suspect Emma is waiting to join us. I don't think we can take anything else right at the moment, so let's perhaps just give her a moment. While we're waiting for Emma, I should have embarrassed Hayley Corley, my EA who works in with Sian's team, for updating the descriptions of the committees and that piece of work that has been done. It's a really helpful piece of work, so thank you to Hayley. Steve, I don't think there is any part of your report we could just quickly nip into, is there? Because there's quite a lot in there, but I don't think we can easily take anything out of line.
There are potentially individual sections I could briefly comment on, Mary, if that's helpful.
I think that would be helpful, and then when Emma joins us, we could pause and take the signing. So if you wouldn't mind, Steve, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Murray. And I might just comment briefly on the service story that we had. As you said, it's an absolute privilege to be able to work with such compassionate, caring, amazing colleagues, individuals and teams. So it is really, really lovely to be able to showcase that, celebrate that, and to provide our board's support to that. So thank you for that. I see actually that Emma's just joined us now, so I might, if it's okay, Mary, welcome Professor Emma Hunt, Vice-Chancellor for Falmouth University. We've already said hello to Drummond Masterton. Welcome to both of you. And it's a really exciting opportunity for us as a board and for our organisation to be looking at progressing further our partnership relationship with Falmouth University. That's a really important one to us, and we're all very excited to this. So welcome to you both. Can I thank you both for the support that your organisation has showed to Royal Cornwall Hospital NHS Trust, and if I can also acknowledge Tom's leadership and work. Tom, thank you to you and the team who've navigated through this as well. We have been working together between our two organisations for some time, and we consider now, Mary, that we're ready to formalise that through a memorandum of understanding, which would be similar to the approach that we have with other universities that we work with. And those educational research and innovation partnerships are critically important to the NHS at any time, but perhaps now more so than ever, with the challenges and the opportunities facing our organisation and the NHS. I'm going to hand over to Emma Drummond and Tom in a moment. We've got a short presentation to go through just to provide some of the highlights as to how we would work together and what this memorandum of understanding would signify. Before I do that, Mary, I think it might be useful for the board to give consideration as well going forward to how we would oversee the progress of this memorandum of understanding, but also how we would do that with our other memorandums of understanding and the potential role that Quality Assurance Committee and Finance and Performance Committee and our executive leadership team may have in helping to progress, but also to scrutinise and provide assurance to a board as these steps progress going forward would be a useful one for us to give consideration to as well. Tom, if I hand over to you at this point, and then I know we're going to ask Emma and Drummond to provide a brief summary as well.
Thank you very much, Steve. So as you've already said, this is tremendously exciting from our perspective. Over the last few months, if not years, we've been working closely with Falmouth University with regards to clinical innovations, particularly those that are about the creation of new medical devices. Of course, Falmouth University has amazing expertise in clinical design and art, and we wanted to really formalise the relationship that we've established over the past few months and set some new ambition going into the future, because whilst we're just about to see a presentation on some of the amazing work we've done together today, we certainly feel that we could do even more than that as two partners working together in areas of mutual alignment, such as the green sustainability agenda, research, teaching and education, broader contribution to social value, etc. I know later on in the board meeting, board colleagues, both Vice Chancellor Emma Hunt and Steve are going to sign the MOU. It's probably just worth noting, though, that yesterday this MOU was fully endorsed by all of our senior executive and clinical leaders, our executive leadership team, so it has the full support of our senior management team, and it was formally approved yesterday. But now the exciting bit starts. I'm going to hand over to Emma and Drummond, who are going to give you a brief presentation on the work we've undertaken to date. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom. Emma, would you like to go first?
Thanks, yes, and thank you everybody, and thank you very much for the warm welcome. Not dissimilar to Steve, I joined the university in January this year, so it's my first signing of an MOU with a great partner, and it's a delight for me to be able to do that. I come absolutely in favour of partnership working and absolutely want to endorse and continue the way in which Falmouth University brings its very unique perspective of creative and cultural learning to other disciplines, such as in healthcare. And I'm a great believer in not just living longer, but living well. And I think that creativity and culture can absolutely help with that. So it's an absolute delight for me to be here and to sign that MOU. And I know that Drummond and colleagues have done huge amounts of work in the past, and I can only endorse and thank them for that. We're also looking at our 2030 strategy. We're refreshing it, and very much part of that is the role we play as an anchor institution, just like you, and the way in which it's important for a county like Cornwall to absolutely come together and use our different strengths so that we can actually help Cornwall get even better than it already is. And so our refresh is looking at our regional engagement, looking at how we use our particular perspective to solve some of those big, thorny, challenging problems. So it's a pleasure to be here. I will hand over to Drummond, who will have a little presentation and who's been absolutely the guiding light behind this so far. So all credit to Drummond and colleagues, and thanks Tom as well. But great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me. And somehow in a minute we'll do a signing of the MOU, and it's great to hear that it's been fully endorsed already. So thank you for that update. Thank you very much. Over to you, Drummond.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Emma, and it's a real privilege and pleasure to present to you today some of the work that we've done in the past with NHS Rcht colleagues. My name's Drummond Masterton, and I'm the Head of Architecture and Design at Falmouth University, and I worked in partnership with the NHS over the last 10 years on live projects with students and staff. Next slide, please. Some of the future working opportunities we feel that we could benefit from both ways in terms of the MOU partnership is really around simplifying inquiry and communication between partnerships. Over the many years we've worked together, the communication lines of sight have been to one or two individuals in the institution, and it feels now really the time to formalise the opportunities and sharing of opportunities between our two institutions. Really, we see this going to what Tom talked about, so co-developing live design opportunities, partnership expertise in research and innovation funding bids, one of our priority areas, reaching forward to commercialisation agreements and being able to take the next step to provide actual delivery of solutions on the ground, enhanced PhD directed projects and short courses to enable health pipelines to open for other entrepreneurs that want to invest in healthcare area. Next slide, please. Some of the projects we've been involved in recently involve colleagues Marion Grimshaw looking at EDS or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome wrist braces, and using some of the digital technology we have at the university, such as 3D scanning, to create print-on-demand solutions that enable less time for patients and clinicians travelling between to replace small parts. So for things like assistive wrist braces, which have hygiene issues and use issues, wear out very quickly, 3D printing and new technologies offer potential. This has actually taken us to our first commercialisation agreement in principle between Falmouth student and NHS colleagues, and we're really excited by that next stepping stone to try and get this to a marketable position. Next slide, please. This is a highlight of Christian's work showing 3D printed version of Marion's wrist brace and some of the enhancements that can be offered around things like comfort through bespoke design, hygiene, different levels of support that can be used in orthoses, and the aesthetic values that can be added to medical components to enhance the quality of living. Next slide, please. My colleague Brian Clark in the graphic design department has worked closely with NHS Rcht to develop an app to monitor the health of junior doctors looking at mental health, using co-design techniques to find a language of understanding between doctors and senior staff to monitor, track and report the health of the workforce. Brian's looking for future funding on this, and we're hopeful that this will go forwards to being a fully used app in the service. Next slide, please. a very successful project that was run with Cornwall Mobility, although not one of the partners. Showed great kind of opportunity by Isabel, one of our design students. This is now in production with Amafi Cutlery in Germany, one of the Red Dot shortlisted projects. Really thinking about the aesthetics of medical assistive living aids and how we can achieve dignity and kind of respect for people who need to gain benefit from using assistive aids. Next slide, please. My colleague Simon Andrews, who's also studying a National Productivity Innovation funded PhD for trips and slips in the elderly, worked with Cornwall Mobility to design this sand chair, a replacement product to a US imported product. Now 10 chairs available for hire in Cornish beaches, enabling wheelchair users to have direct access to sand and sea. Next slide, please. On the arts and health side, we saw one of our students, Luke, work with Guernsey Hospital, looking at oximeters and creating these paper attachments to oximeters for children for them to colour in before waiting to see a clinician to get more accurate data readings. So a really lovely project that involves arts and product design. Next slide, please. And finally, a project that we also worked with Marion on, which was a redesign of the Unloader 1 knee brace, a very popular product in the NHS. Again, looking at aesthetics and communication techniques to ensure people feel able to use the product, and because of that, use it more often. So a very successful product, the Unloader 1, already 96% effective, but with additional design communication strategies, better user uptake of the product. And final slide, please. And these are some of the areas that we feel that we can work in future. So the slide's a little bit cropped for me, but we've spoken about these briefly, and I think they're noted in the MOU as areas of highlight. I think just also connecting to our research aspect at Falmouth, we have a health focused research centre. And we really see that the MOU will sit within this space and enable colleagues from all the areas of arts and design to contribute into these spaces and help to enhance the work, the great work that your NHS colleagues do, and offer us the chance to apply our design and art skills. Thank you very much for listening, and welcome to accept any questions.
Thank you very much, Drummond, and that is an exciting presentation. While colleagues are thinking if they have any questions, a couple of things. Perhaps, Emma, very nice to meet you. Welcome to Cornwall. It's absolutely great to be able to go ahead and be working together like this. And I think Drummond and Fraser, it's just so exciting to see design put to such practical use, and then the addition of actually making it look nice, which makes so much difference, especially to children. So I find that a really stimulating presentation. And as Steve said, board colleagues, I will put an additional recommendation forward after questions around how we best monitor progress and keep making sure that these things are all going in the right direction and according to our plans. So anybody like to ask a question? Richard, you're saying it's not a question, but you're going to comment. Go ahead, Richard.
If I can, just to thank you, Richard Stevenson, one of the non-executive directors, and just wanted to comment in full support of this. I think it's a brilliant move forward for the trust. I think, as you've said, Emma, and in the presentation, that productivity challenge, that innovation challenge, that vexing challenges that we have as a trust are best addressed through that interdisciplinary interface between industry and academia, and I really welcome the signing of the MOU and very much further to that the work that will follow it. Steve asked in the introduction, is there anything that we would like to see? I suppose the request I'd like to see is whether we can help broker some of the relationships between the universities that we serve with our MOUs independently, to bring a collective view of that interdisciplinary activity, to focus on our needs, but also to look at where funding and commercialisation can flow from that. So thank you, very much welcomed.
Oh, thank you, Richard. And Alison, you want to put a question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, really exciting in terms of the partnership. I suppose I had one little question in terms of PPE and just wondered whether the 3D printing also had the opportunity to create face shields, or perhaps you already do this.
Thanks, Alison. That's a really great question. And during the pandemic, in fact, our technical staff did utilise the 3D printing facilities at our Falmouth campus to help create face shields for provision to NHS. We still have that ability to do that. And the lovely thing with our 3D printers is obviously they can work 24 hours a day. Yeah, that's definitely something that we can we can carry on facilitating. Connected to that, which is really interesting in the sustainability point that was at the bottom of that presentation, is one of our alumni is receiving approximately a ton of PPE wastage from Treliske Hospital currently as recycled plastic block, and we're looking at shredding that and creating more 3D printing filament so that we can circular economy that material supply so that face masks and gowns can actually go into second use purposes, which is a really nice project from one of our alumni students.
Thank you, Drummond, and I think we could probably speak for a long time on this subject, and we don't have a long time, but you can hear the interest and the excitement. I wonder, Fraser, if I could ask you to comment, because you've been so involved in this project for such a long time. Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. No, it's just a really exciting a combination of a lot of hard work in the background with a lot of colleagues in both the university and the trust to get to this point. And I think it just is a really exciting opportunity to look forward in the range of and scope of developments we can offer our workforce in the trust and collaborating with university colleagues. So it's really about the communication that we progress now to make sure that it's widely known in our organisations the opportunity that this MOU now delivers us. So it's delivering on this is the next exciting step.
Thank you, Fraser, and I do want to give Ross Davies, who does so much work for our sustainability, the credit for the Steri Melt. What a wonderful phrase to use for the recycling that we've just heard about. So I think probably what we're asked to do, unless Emma, is there anything else you would like to say before I ask Steve to sort of pull this to a close, and then we'll come to our recommendation?
No, other than I'm equally as excited and passionate about this area of work as everybody else in this call. So thank you, and really looking forward to seeing the outcomes as we continue to work together. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma. Steve, is there anything else you would like to add?
Just to say thank you again to everyone involved, Mary. It's absolutely fantastic to see this partnership across education and health delivering transformational change already, and we've touched on some of the really exciting opportunities going forward. So it's very, very significant in its own right. When we see that alongside our other education partnerships, this is certainly an important part of how we progress to achieve that university teaching hospital status, which will further transform hospital and broader healthcare in this region. So very exciting in that context as well.
Thank you, Steve. And before I come to ask us to do the usual, I'm just noting Alison's comment about the Junior Doctors app. Be interesting to look at the outcomes of this in the future. So I think my additional recommendation might pick this up. So firstly, and before we come to the signing, are we happy as a board to endorse this memorandum of understanding? And if you could indicate in the chat that you are, and then I will read out my additional recommendation, which is that we agree that activity undertaken in the MOUs, all of them, with Trust Higher Education partners, be reported for quality assurance through the Quality Assurance Committee, because that committee has the remit for research, and that any specific initiatives relating to potential commercialisation of activities are scrutinised by Finance and Performance Committee before proceeding. And we can take a biannual monitoring report for the management oversight will go to the executive leadership team. So sorry, that's a bit of a long amendment, apologies, but I think Sian will take that. And as far as I can see, people are going ahead and endorsing and agreeing those recommendations. So I think, Emma, we're going to do a wonderful online virtual signing in a moment, and I thought I'd let Steve do the first bit, so if he makes the best of it, you can get it right. So Steve, you're going to sign first, and then Emma, and we're going to bring the camera in on you as you sign.
So it's an absolute privilege to be able to sign that memorandum of understanding, which I've now done. Thank you.
Thank you. And over to you, Emma, for your signature.
And likewise, and I'm happy to show it in some way.
Lovely. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for joining our board, and you know, perhaps next time we review all this, you guys would like to come along as well, and we're very excited to see how it goes forward. Thank you for taking time to join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to Fraser and Tom as well. Really great piece of work. Which brings us, Steve, to the body of your Chief Executive's report. If you would like to take us through that, please.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mari. Clearly, there's a significant amount of information in the Chief Executive's report, so I won't cover all of that, but very happy to take any questions on any part of the Chief Executive's report. Just a couple of brief points to draw board members' attention to particularly. Firstly, celebrating the 30th anniversary of our trust is a major milestone, and for that to have been achieved last month is very significant for our trust, but also that in the context of engaging with staff, clinical teams, colleagues and support services across our organisation, and we'll be doing that with the wider public engagement as well as an opportunity to refresh our long-term strategy and start to look ahead to what that 40th year anniversary might look like in 10 years' time. So that strategic development, I think, is a significant piece for us to be progressing, and it's very positive to see the strong engagement from staff across our organisation already in the short time we've been engaging in that. Secondly, the board report provides significant information on the external well-led governance review. So it's very positive to see that review having been conducted. We've provided the feedback from that review and also attached an action plan. You'll see, and board members will see, the review identifies significant areas of really positive governance examples, but also identifies significant areas of governance improvement over the past 12 to 18 months, and also identifies ongoing areas for improvement. It's those ongoing areas for improvement that are drawn out in the action plan. So that's an important matter for our board to consider as well. We make reference to the CQC urgent and emergency care inspection of Royal Cornwall Hospital NHS Trust, and of course that's part of a system-wide urgent and emergency care inspection by CQC, including our other partners in the system. So there'll be further feedback on that later this month from the CQC in respect to that. Also to note the progress across the system on implementing the Department of Health and Social Care recent updated guidance, which was published on the 31st of March in respect of discharging home for those patients whose ultimate place of care will be home, to allow them to be assessed for their ongoing home care needs in the home rather than in a hospital setting. And of course, hospital settings can be stressful. And there's, I think, a wealth of information and evidence now to show that those assessments being undertaken at home can provide a better environment for patients and their family to consider those assessments, and for those home care mechanisms to be put in place through council, through commissioners and through community NHS providers as well. So very positive to see that guidance come out, but also to see our system partners support that with the implementation of that updated guidance towards the end of last month. And then finally, the financial information contained in the report briefly and also provided through Carl as well. So identify there the outturn financially for the last financial year, a small surplus of £888,000 surplus. I think that reflects a huge amount of work from colleagues across our organisation. I'm certainly very grateful for that. Of course, that is subject to external audit processes, so we're still working through that process. More challenging for us, of course, is the outlook for this financial year, and we still, as a trust and as a system, have significant further work to do to identify further opportunities for transformation and financial sustainability improvement in the environment that we're in. The NHS regionally and nationally faces significant challenges in this area. We all know, I think, that inflation, for example, is significantly higher than initial indications were, and that's, I think, affecting all parts of community, but certainly affecting the NHS as well. So that's a particular area of focus, as is the transition with the COVID environment, moving into a living with COVID environment, and we still do carry some of those COVID expenditure costs. So further work is underway this week and next week, and we'll be expecting a further Cornwall and the Isles system financial plan submission to the NHS England regionally towards the end of May, and we'll be updating board between now and then as that work progresses as well. But I'm very happy to take any questions or provide any more information on any of those items or anything else that was in the report.
Thank you very much, Steve. And before I perhaps pick up other people's questions, I think I really value this thorough report and account of so many things that are going on. It's good to bring that to the board's attention. And I think I'd particularly pick out the point that you've raised about transformation. Generally, we've all known as a country that our NHS can't perhaps continue in the way that it always has. And so I think what we are hoping is that our whole community will get involved in that discussion about how best we make ourselves sustainable while keeping up the same high standards. So, you know, if we thought we've had change before, we've got more change coming, I'm pretty sure. So thank you for your report, Steve. I've got Sarah Newton would like to speak.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Steve. It was really an excellent report, as Mari says, and I really wanted to congratulate you on the work that you've led with the system to secure that agreement for the discharge to home, because from a patient's point of view, that is definitely better. I mean, there's a lot of research to say all the points that you said are true, and it's really pleasing to see that the system is very much supporting that. So really well done for your personal leadership in achieving that. So you mentioned that work would start on that quite soon. So I'm just wondering, has an action plan been developed to enable that? And which committee of the Trust will be having the opportunity to look at that in detail?
Thank you for that, Sarah. Certainly grateful for the feedback, and then of course the important next steps in respect to that action plan. There is a system-wide action plan to support improved discharge from Royal Cornwall Hospital beds, which encompasses this aspect of the pathway 1 patients, those patients who are discharged home. But that action plan is a broader one. It also encompasses those patients who are medically fit for discharge but are waiting for discharge into a bedded residential care home setting, dementia care, or other form of care as well. So that system-wide plan has been developed. That's now already delivering, and there is system-wide oversight of that through chief executives and through chairs to provide that system oversight. Just in respect of the pathway 1 patients, those patients to be discharged home for assessment, that was broken into 2 parts. One, to provide mechanisms where newly admitted patients who become pathway 1 patients for discharge home can be quite rapidly discharged once they're medically optimised for assessment at home. But also there is a cohort of patients who have been in hospital for some time, who've been optimised for discharge. And for them, more support will be required to enable them to be discharged home. And a particular area of focus was put in place through Cornwall Council and through the CCG and the Community Partnership Trust to enable progress on those patients. The NHS would use terminology around stranded or super stranded in respect to those patients, depending on how long they were inpatient wise, and we receive reports through the CCG on the progress of those areas. And I received a report as recently as yesterday from Kate Shields, just updating on the progress of those. So a huge amount of work is underway. In respect of the oversight and scrutiny within RCHT from our board's committee perspective, I think there would be two areas of interest. One on the performance side in respect of the impact that this programme of work and these action plans have on performance, particularly on ambulance delay performance and also on emergency department performance. But actually, this is one of the challenges which has impacted our elective planned care performance. So there's a range of performance indicators impacted by that. But also it could be one of interest to the Quality Assurance Committee and potentially our risk committee as well, given the various components of that. And certainly at a system level, we've considered the risk, the performance and the quality impacts, improvements, opportunities and challenges associated with the various aspects of this. I might briefly, Mary, if it's okay, ask if Susan would like to add anything to that in respect of the performance oversight of these programmes.
Thank you very much, Steve. Susan, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we've got an echo. Can I just change over to speaker?
Is that better? Can you hear me? Fabulous. Okay, yeah, the other area that this will be picked up, Chair, will be through the flow programme that we've got within the hospital. If you recall, we had our seasonal plan that had the flow in, flow through, flow out. We've now lifted that as a distinct piece of work on its own, which is supported by Tom's team, the QI team. And very clearly what we monitor there is our what we call our pathway zeros, our pathway ones, pathway twos and pathway threes, which is how nationally they've segregated discharges from the hospital. The pathway zeros were, in the olden day language, was our simple discharges. Pathway ones are those folk that need some sort of package of care, whether it's once a day, right the way up to double-handed, twice a day, 4 times a day package of care. So we monitor it through the flow programme, and of course all of this will be captured on our IPR. That's the other area that this will be reported. So there's various ways, and rightly so, that we triangulate the effectiveness of this work, and if it's actually truly landed, and it's not just as a consequence of COVID numbers dropping as well. We need to make sure that actually what we've put in place is working, and we will also monitor it as a system through our tactical and strategic meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Sarah, does that sort of satisfy your question? Thank you. And just for the benefit of members of the public, Steve mentioned Kate. Kate Shields is the Chief Executive of the Integrated Care Board, and Susan mentioned the IPR, and that is our Integrated Performance Report. So just so that we're really clear about what people are saying. Are there any further questions on anything on Steve's report or comments? Okay, so I think what we're going to be clear about is that the key indicators around all of that that Steve and Susan have been mentioning will be monitored through our integrated performance report. Before asking people to indicate their agreement or otherwise, I just want to be clear that in relation to the external well-led governance review and improvement plan, we're being asked to note the well-led governance review, which is at Appendix 1. We're being asked to approve the governance improvement plan, which is at Appendix 2. And actually that in doing so, 22 out of 23 actions we want to just note had been completed from the 2021 governance improvement plan. The remaining action on streamlining and clarifying the executive governance structure was partially complete, as you can see, and has been transferred into the 22-23 plan. We're then being asked to agree the proposed monitoring and assurance arrangements for that improvement plan. Asked to note and discuss the initial feedback letter received from the CQC, which is at Appendix 3. Note the arrangements put in place with system partners to support discharge to assess Home First. Note the Trust has met the requirements of all aspects of the 2 health and safety improvement notices and 2 material breaches, and that the public database has been amended to indicate our compliance. And then finally, as a general point, to note the remainder of the Chief Executive's report. If people would be good enough to just pop that agreement and noting on the screen, I will then ask us to move on to Susan's, as Chief Operating Officer. Susan Brafield is going to introduce the item on our COVID briefing. So Susan, over to you. And please don't apologise for using acronyms. We all do it.
Thank you. I will do my best. Thank you. I'm just going to give a very, very brief update on where we are with COVID, because I'm pleased to report the position is improving at long last, and long may that last as well. Okay, next slide. So it's just a quick overview, following the same format. So I think it's fair to say since the last presentation, we have had a peak, Chair, in COVID, and we tend to see this in Cornwall because of the holiday periods that we get. We get lots of visitors into our beautiful county. So we saw a peak after the, I think it was the February half term. We had a very large peak. In fact, not only did that affect our patient group, but it also affected our staff, and in particular areas like my own, for example, in estates and facilities, we had up to 50% of our staff off during periods because of COVID. As of today, in fact, that number has reduced again. The inpatient number is down to 30. So the good news is we've been able to pull back from a lot of our wards. As you know, during these reports, we've had to turn an awful lot of our wards red. And just to give that context, our general and adult beds, we've got around about 520 what we call G&A beds. We were at some points between delays and COVID, 50% of our general adult beds were out of action. So to get down to 30 is phenomenal. And what that means for us is the Wellington ward, which has been our respiratory ward, has been red for 2 years. We've just got that back to amber. So that's a huge achievement and a huge relief for the staff, because that's relentless for 2 years to work in those conditions. So we continue to work very, very closely with our infection prevention and control team, and the guidelines. They have been phenomenal during the last 2 years. I do have to give mention to the team who've kept us safe, kept our patients safe, and kept us well informed. What we do need to do now is we need to move into a place where we manage COVID as part of our everyday business in the same way we do flu. And that takes, as well as taking the guidance, it takes confidence to do that, to feel safe in what we do and the decisions that we make. If we could go to the next slide, please. So the population testing as well, it's worth remarking the uptake within COVID has been excellent for the vaccinations, and we're rolling out the 4th booster as you're aware, but the public have responded very well. This is the total position for Cornwall, and as well as the total population for Cornwall. We continue to promote this with our staff as well, because it's important that we keep our staff safe, who keep our patients safe. Okay, next slide. So all of our 4-phase plans remain in place. They stood the test of time. We put those into action 2 years ago, and they tell us sort of the way in which we need to behave operationally and clinically as the numbers peak and trough and reduce, thankfully. We've kept the incident command centre in place. That's a signposting function, and make sure that the communications, anything to do with COVID, is disseminated quickly and effectively across the trust. And again, I have to say a big thank you to the guys that have manned the incident command centre. They've done a sterling job, and we have a very clear and concise audit trail over the last 2 years of the decisions we've made, who made them, why we made them, and what the outcomes were. That's really important that we do that. So what we're doing now, Chair, is we're really pushing the flow programme that I've just briefly mentioned, because we do need to recover. Not only do we need to recover our elective positions, so all of those people that are sitting on our waiting list, but we also need to recover the way in which we do business within the hospital. We know there's lots of publicity around the ambulances that we continue to hold. Those numbers are reducing, the time in which we're holding ambulances is reducing, and the flow programme is the mechanism by which we can measure the effectiveness of the actions that we take. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a very quick overview of the flow programme. I would like to point out that each area within the flow programme has an executive sponsor, which is incredibly important. It gives that level of credibility that this work needs. But more importantly, it's led by our very senior clinicians. This has got to be clinically led. And recently we've added our bed reconfiguration programme into the overall flow programme, because the way in which we rebase our beds post-COVID, or as the COVID numbers come down, is incredibly important, because we need to give surgery back their bed base that we've had to borrow to allow us to expand our medical numbers to manage COVID. Okay, thank you. We have had further relaxation of our visitor restrictions, which is incredibly important. Being able to sense some of the distress and understand the distress that's caused by not enabling people to come and see their loved ones at very difficult times is incredibly important, but weighing that up against not having further spreads of COVID. So we still have some restrictions in place. That's because COVID hasn't gone away, and we're also mindful we've just had the Easter holidays, so we are tracking very carefully those numbers of COVID. So we have kept some restrictions in place, Chair, which is not unusual. Other hospitals have done exactly the same, and it's important because we have a very closed environment in hospitals. It's not like you're out shopping, or I know a lot of people say, well, we don't have this in pubs and we don't have this in restaurants. We have a population who have COVID and come to the hospital, so we need to recognise that. But we continue to review with our infection prevention and control team the guidelines around visiting, and of course any visiting request that's referred will come through Kim and myself and Alistair, and we'll consider that on an individual basis. There is always special dispensation that we consider so that we minimise any distress. Next slide, please. So the risks and themes remain unchanged. We continue to use our bed base as effectively as we can. We've got very few beds closed now, which is fantastic. We still have that ability to dynamically flex up and down, and that includes our staff as well. We still have that ability to use our care buddies. We still remain in a state of OPA4 critical incident, and that's not just COVID. So that ability to manage our staff and have our staff support us, and they have done so incredibly well over the last 2 years, has been really important to the success of us managing COVID and not having any further outbreaks, keeping everybody safe. Okay. So the main challenge, as I said, it's very obvious. We have to live with COVID. We have to find a way of managing it, and that we know that through the control centre we can reinstate any of the actions very quickly. We've got that agility now. We've learned over the last 2 years what we need to do, but we do need to move to a business as usual. So I'm happy, Chair, to keep bringing the updates to board, but it may be the board wants to consider if that's useful, bearing in mind we do need to move into that business as usual state. So I will leave it there, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan, and you echo my thoughts on that, so I'll perhaps come to that at the end. I just want to completely endorse what you've just been saying about how well everybody has done in very difficult circumstances. You mentioned the infection and prevention and control team. They've had such a job to do, haven't they, in the last period, and done it very well. So everybody deserves a big pat on the back. And I think what I'm aware of is, as we start with COVID, it is likely that the effects of such intense activity will begin to be felt a little bit more by individuals, because when there's a crisis, we keep going, don't we? So I think we need to go on with being kind to each other and looking out for each other in the way that I know we're good at doing. Before others come through, just while I'm waiting for questions, could you help me, and I probably should know this, how are our public being kept updated with our visiting policy and any restrictions? How do people know what we're doing regarding visiting as it changes?
The most obvious answer to that, Chair, is our website, and directing people to the website, and we can send those messages out through social media. Our public respond well to our social media, whether it's Twitter or whether it's Facebook, but the main information is on our website. And I think the population across the UK is getting used to looking at websites for acute trust in particular. So we'll continue to put those messages out. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susan. Are there any other comments or questions for Susan? I don't think so. Oh, unless one just popped up. Bernie, would you like to just say what you've put on the screen so people know?
So we've seen a reduction in contacts to our patient experience team since visitings opens, which I think is really important, because the patient experience team have been a core link with the ward teams and the public in terms of trying to support patients during this period. So that's encouraging.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Bernie. In which case, Board, I'm wanting to note, if we can, the latest position described by Susan and in the paper. And I would like to propose that the COVID-19 updates are in future included in the Chief Exec's report rather than as a separate item. If that proves not to work, we can always go back to doing it separately, but I think we could now move to an integration. And I think there's something symbolic about that, isn't there? We, as Susan has been saying, we do now need to live with COVID and live carefully and properly. So I think to make it part of business as usual through Steve's report will be the right way forward. Oh, Laura, thank you. You're also adding that media interviews were done at the time of the latest update on visiting. Thank you. So colleagues, if you could note and support that move, I would be grateful. Give Susan a slight breathing space before asking her then to introduce us to the Integrated Performance Report month 12, please. And there are plenty of noting and supports coming through. Thank you. Susan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to keep this fairly brief, as we know getting to grips with our IPR and giving the description of that has always been a real challenge for us. So I'm happy to keep it brief and then take any questions. However, I just would like to highlight the areas really for note, which is that we continue to experience ambulance delays. However, whilst it doesn't feel like it's improving, it has improved, and we will continue to work with our colleagues in the ambulance service. We are seeing that there's been an improvement in the number of delays that are greater than 30 and 60 minutes for this month at the period of this IPR, the performance report. Whilst it's not where it needs to be, it is, as I say, it's an improvement. We are not meeting our 4-hour access targets, but we continue through the flow programme to identify areas for improvement. The other indicator that we talk about quite a bit is our crude mortality, and we know that the Mortality Review Oversight Group is taking a lead on looking at those key indicators. We know that we can see our performance, particularly for folk with fractured neck of femurs, stroke, are not where they should be, and we're seeing a higher mortality than we would like. We also know that we have a significant number of people who are delayed in hospital, who we know their experience is not good as a result of being delayed. And equally, we've got patients who are delayed within our ED department, and we know from years of research that the longer you're delayed within an ED department, the poorer your outcomes are. So those are the areas really that we have been concentrating on, and we've taken all of the safety issues through our quality assurance committee and have agreed that we would look specifically at safety, and I know that there are a number of deep dives going on. In terms of our elective recovery, I just want to highlight from our performance review is that we continue to see growth in our waiting lists. We have seen 11.8% growth since September, so that's quite a big jump. Bearing in mind that we're holding backlogs. So if that continues, if we continue to see that growth, we are really going to struggle. However, there are lots of recovery plans underway, and what I'd like to concentrate on is what we're doing rather than just reporting what is quite a depressing picture at the moment. We are seeing that our cancer is still in a good position, however, it has deteriorated. And I think it's fair to say that one of our linchpins in our elective recovery is our diagnostics, our ability to do diagnostics, because that tells us as a trust what onward treatments our patients need, or if in fact they do need treatment. So being able to maintain a good position for diagnostics is incredibly important. We have seen that slip, so we are now below 60% on our diagnostic recovery, with a particular issue around imaging. So we are seeing our demand both at the front door and, as I've just said, on our waiting list increase. So all of those diagnostics, particularly imaging, is really seeing huge demand. We continue, however, regardless of that, to maintain a healthy position across the southwest, and in fact are being asked to provide mutual aid to Derriford. We're specifically providing mutual aid for those patients who are in the north of the county, Derriford facing, around orthopedics. Particularly where we've got 104-week waits, and you'll remember me explaining before that the areas for us to improve nationally are on those patients who are in the 104-week waits. We have seen a reduction to 31, however, we do have a target to hit to clear 104-week waits by July. We will struggle to do that, but that doesn't mean to say we won't continue. We are holding steady on the 78, and we are doing our best to reduce our 52-week waits, because of course our 52-week waits are tomorrow's 104-week waits. And all of that, we're also trying to take some of that clinical input that we see in follow-ups, for example, reducing our follow-ups by 25%. And what that allows us to do, Chair, is to take that clinical time and plug it into the front of our pathways. So that's seeing patients promptly and debating with the patients, deciding with the patients through shared decision making whether or not a treatment is appropriate or whether there's some other treatment that's available. We are seeing our longest waiting within orthopedics, and again I'd like to remind the board that we are still managing our waiting list based on priority categories which have been agreed nationally. So an awful lot of our patients that need orthopedic interventions do not flag as being urgent. So our cancer patients are obviously our most urgent, along with our emergency surgeries, and we are still managing our waiting list on that basis, as well as health inequalities. So we're really juggling how we manage on what's limited capacity because of the bed base within the hospital, but we are managing it as well as offering mutual aid to Derriford. So that there's an awful lot going on in elective care. We've had, I think I mentioned it, we had the Getting It Right First Time. Professor Tim Briggs came to visit us and was very complimentary about the work that we're doing in Cornwall, and some of the initiatives that we have in process at the moment, which he's sharing nationally. So I think that's really important, that whilst this feels fairly difficult and challenging, there is some fantastic work that our surgeons, our anaesthetists are doing that really do need mentioning. So I think that's all I'd like to say at this moment in time. We do have more work to do on areas like our sepsis. We know that having the ambulance waits, getting to patients with potential sepsis has been more challenging. Getting people off ambulances quickly and into our ED department, which if you recall last time I spoke about, our ED department had been bedded. So we were using our ED department almost as another ward, which has seen our average length of stay increase because those patients are not getting to our short stay wards, and therefore the counting in the way in which it's accounted for, we see an increase in our average length of stay. We're also seeing that increase because of patients who are delayed. Those numbers are still quite high. They're not where we would like them to be, and they need to be reduced very, very quickly. we have more work we need to do, and Alison's picked this up with our mandatory training and our appraisals. We know that we've had high numbers of staff absent, either through COVID or either with stress and other the usual illnesses that we see during sort of winter into spring. And also we've seen the operational challenges, which has made it very difficult for people to be released to do training, which means a lot of people are having to do things like mandatory training in their own time. That's a big ask for people who are tired. So we are working through ways of making it easier for people to access their mandatory training and to get those appraisals done, because the appraisals also have those health and wellbeing questions, which are incredibly important. And our occupational health department is working really hard to offer different alternatives and different services to keep our staff healthy and happy and feeling supported. I will leave it there because I have other colleagues that have various parts of the IPR in their portfolio. They may want to comment. I am leaving finance because I know Carl's got a number of papers that he'll be presenting. So happy to leave it there. It's a bit of a ramble. Apologies.
Thank you, Susan. No, really comprehensive, and I do have bits to pick up, so perhaps we can pick them up as we go through. I haven't got anyone at the moment indicating to speak. I think I can't remember what page it's on. I've just been trying to look, but you mentioned that shared decision making between clinicians and patients around follow-up appointments and so on. I also noticed somewhere in the papers the shared decision making around medications and what are more and less sustainable, and I think that's a really important point to raise. I think the other thing you've talked about is our increasing need to focus on the health inequalities. And in fact, the new legislation coming through in the health and social care legislation gives us a duty to do that more. And I think that will be pleasing to see. For me, the other point that you've made about people who are delayed in being discharged is that as a society, we have a belief that people are safe once they're in hospital, but actually once people are ready to leave hospital, it's not the best place for them to be. And so it's not a lack of compassion, it's actually us acknowledging that people are better, because people just lose ability, don't they, when they're stuck with us. So if I could thank you, I've got a question perhaps Alison can pick up, because you have addressed it, but it is around appraisals, and I'd just be grateful, maybe Alison can help around what are any other innovative things we can do about appraisals, and are we sure what other trusts are doing, and is there any learning we can take, because we can't be the only trust to be in the position that you've just described. So I don't know, Alison, if you could help me on that.
Yes, thank you, Mary. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is making sure that we're integrating a wellbeing conversation with our appraisals. We've shortened the paperwork. I would like to think in the future, although not now, that perhaps we can do appraisals in some sort of shorted electronic process. In terms of what other trusts are doing, I think this could be a really good agenda item for the Southwest HR Directors Network, and I will certainly suggest that. I'm not aware of any new national developments, so there are a lot of things coming on board in terms of talent management that we're looking to introduce within the trust. But of course, it's a question of timing, and perhaps we're almost getting to that, as I say, as some of that pressure starts to ease on the trust. Perhaps we can start to get to some of this longer term talent management conversations with the staff, which is also linked to appraisals as well.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. I think I know there is some national work going on, but I know this is one of my favourite subjects, but you know, appraisals are so important, aren't they? Getting that feedback between staff. So even if, you know, I think I worry sometimes that people think an appraisal is some big thing that you have to do. Actually, it's just giving a little bit of feedback as you go along can be really brilliant. So it'll be good to hear how that goes. with the Southwest network. Ruth, I know you're struggling a bit with your Wi-Fi this morning, but I think you have a question, so it's great that you're there.
Yes, thanks, Mari. Susan, in the IPR, I note that work is being done with Southwest Ambulance Service around sepsis and around, you mentioned PGD, in that's a way of prescribing for our patients who are waiting for sepsis. I just wondered how that is progressing, and are we making progress with it?
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, do you know what, I'm going to hand over to Bernie, because Bernie's been doing quite a lot of work with Southwest Ambulance around the whole of the safety metrics, which includes sepsis. If I hand over to Bernie first, if that's okay.
And then perhaps we could bring Alistair in after Bernie. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So, Ruth, as you know, there is a patient safety investigation that we have done in conjunction with Southwest Ambulance Service that looked at the sepsis pathway. There are a number of recommendations around improvements for our emergency department, which have been accepted and those have been worked through. And then a further one in relation to looking at paramedic administration of antibiotics early in the pathway, because regardless of whether you're subject to delay, timely antibiotic administration is important. So Naomi Burden's been leading on that, our patient safety specialist. Progress has been made, but we are picking it up regionally because of some of the practical implications around this for ambulance crews. So progress has been made, but we still haven't got a kind of what I would describe as a definitive accepted plan for delivery, and regional pharmacy colleagues are involved, and also there's been some tentative new guidance that has come down nationally that we need to consider. The actual investigation report is going to the Incident Review and Learning Group report today, so I'll be able to provide a more comprehensive update at the next Quality Assurance Committee.
Thank you very much, and I think Alistair's indicating that you've picked up the point that he wanted to make. Richard, I think you've got a question on the mortality metrics.
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you. It's first to applaud the work of the Mortality Review and Oversight Group. It's doing a fantastic job of digging deeply into it, and that reports through Quality Assurance Committee, so we get a lot of detail. But I just probably wanted to flag that not just crude mortality, our hospital standardised mortality rate and the standard mortality rate is advancing for the Trust's performance, and I think that probably is a stronger indicator. It has a lag behind crude mortality, but it puts us relative to other trusts, and it may be helpful just as that's rising to assure the board through perhaps some benchmarking about where we sit around mortality, because the rise to 104 or 107 tells us we're above the average. That's what the ratio is telling us. But where we're sitting in our performance, it might be helpful as we try to come to grips with some of the cause and effect of that.
Thank you, Richard. Alistair.
Yeah, so we have talked at length at the Quality Assurance Committee around this, and we know that I think Susan outlined in her introduction to the IPR about the effect that our ambulance queue at the front of the hospital is having on rapid access to appropriate pathways and treatment. So we know that we have policies and procedures in place for ambulances to drop and go when they've got time critical patients in the community who need to get in, so people who need urgent angioplasty or time critical interventions. But there's no doubt that a delay to get an ambulance, and then a delay from getting from the ambulance into the department, and a delay from being in the department to being on the right specialist ward with the right input is certainly skewing our mortality, and that's really shown up in some of those time critical pathways, and specifically, as Susan mentioned, stroke and also what we've found is in fractured neck of femur as well, where we know that if we operate within 12 or 24 hours, the outcomes are very much better than if it's longer than that. So all of the actions that the teams are putting into place about reducing the ambulance delays, improving our flow through the hospital and reducing our long stay patients and getting them to the right places are all the right actions to stop those delays at the front door, which will improve our mortality in the long term. But we would, as you said, Mortality Review Oversight Group and Bernie and myself and the patient safety teams are working really closely with those teams like the orthopedic team and the stroke teams to look at what we can do differently to get those patients in through those pathways and to the right people as quickly as possible. And that is particularly difficult at the moment, and particularly difficult with some of the worst workforce constraints we've had over the last few months, with lots of people being either at home isolating or off sick, and with our vacancies that we're currently carrying in a number of services. So I'm convinced that the actions that we've got in train are the right actions, and that the fact that our COVID admissions are falling is going to help. But there's no doubt that last month was probably the most difficult month of the most difficult year of the most difficult decade that I think any of us have seen for a very long time. But what our teams are doing in some of those metrics that Susan mentioned, you know, even maintaining some of those metrics is really remarkable. Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Richard.
Thank you, Alistair. I'm sure it does, and it is a grim picture that I think, again, as a society, we are aware of some of the ongoing effects of COVID and now post-COVID. But I know that all the staff actually do their very best to make sure some of these unintended consequences are mitigated or indeed don't happen. So thank you for that. Would anybody like to ask anything further or comment? I know I've told you we've got a crowded agenda, but please don't let that stop you from speaking up if you want to. I promise I'll manage the time if you do. If there isn't anything else on the performance report, we're asked to note it, and having discussed it for assurance. So thank you for that, Steve. And if I could then move us on to item 10 and invite Carl, the Director of Finance, to introduce the year-end month 12 finance report. Carl, thank you. And I know there's quite a bit to say, so please don't feel you should be too constrained. It's important we hear it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to add to Steve's introduction earlier in the Chief Exec's report, I'm really pleased to present the year-end financial position, which from a revenue perspective is an £888,000 surplus against a planned break-even. It's just within 0.2% of our now £580 million turnover as a trust, which is a significant increase across the two financial years. Last year it was around 537 million. So we continue to grow as an organisation financially from a funding perspective, although the challenges into 22-23, which I will touch on in a moment if I may, Mary, means that we continue to have a significant challenge as we move across financial years with the changes in the financial regime. The accounts are now subject to audit, and our audit have actually started in the last few days. The accounts were submitted to timescales last Tuesday, and whilst I'm expecting no issues to come through the audit, clearly it is a time where my finance team will be working very closely with the auditors to get through the quite challenging process. As an over £500 million organisation, the audit is an enhanced audit in terms of the review that is undertaken by Grant Thornton as our external auditors. That's similar to last year, and through the audit committee we will obviously continue to brief members as we go through that process. But really pleased with the year-end financial position from a revenue perspective. The area that is a challenge as we move across years is around the savings. So the 2% target, which is just under £12 million, we've broadly delivered, but on a non-recurrent basis, and that translates into a real issue in terms of 22-23, because we have to recover that position. And our target into 22-23 is at least going to be a 3% target, around £60 million. In terms of further work, Steve has set out around the 22-23 financial position, and still trying to get to an agreement with regulators on that and across the system. There will be further challenge around the need to review that and deliver those savings on a recurrent basis. So moving across years, a refocus on efficiency, productivity and controlling our costs becomes a real challenge and focus for the organisation. I think the area that I would like to highlight once again is a very positive achievement around capital. If colleagues could move down to section 3.9, I'm just checking which page that is, page 161 of the report, you will see once again for the second year a considerable capital investment into the trust, around 44 million. That's across 2 financial years. That's now £100 million worth of investment into RCHT. Last year's it was around £56 million, as reported in our annual accounts and annual report. £100 million is significant, and if you look at the breakdown and the investment across the programme as set out in section 3.9, colleagues will see material investment in some of our strategic infrastructure. We continue to progress with the low-end MRI facility that is targeted for completion in March 23, and for the MRIs in May 23. There was £8.9 million worth of ongoing cost there, and I would like to highlight the success of being able to fast track the opening of Wheelvore, which is a £5 million investment as part of the Tremenal unit, and that facility completes in full during this newly started financial year. And ongoing investment in backlog maintenance, which includes the fire remediation work in the tower block, and digital and medical equipment. So £44 million, and we delivered to within £4,000 of that capital resource envelope. So once again, a very positive achievement, and I would like to thank everybody across the organisation that has been involved in delivering that broadly to plan across all the areas. I think Mary, if that's okay, I'll pause there and seek questions.
Thank you very much, Carl. I'm going to bring Richard in as our Chair of Finance and Performance Committee in a moment. But before I do, I know the board will want to extend our thanks to you and your team for that timely submission. We are aware of what a huge amount of work it represents, and I know we have so many teams working hard for us who aren't necessarily seen, and that yours is very much one of them, and we appreciate what you do. And secondly, to endorse what you say about the Wheelvore coming through on time, a really, really excellent project, which has stood us in very good stead in these pressured times. So good forethought there. Richard, I'm wondering whether there's anything further you would like to comment, because I know this has had very good discussion at your committee.
I don't think so, Maria, Chair. I think Carl's laid it out well. I think I would only endorse the comments you've made, really, that this it tells the tale of the finances, but the finances are telling the tale of the improvements that we've done across the hospital, the infrastructure investment, and the delivery of clinical services in exceptional circumstances. So fully support and endorse the end of year reports really here. I think the only one thing I would flag for the board really is just the note around SIP delivery, our continuing improvement performance delivery, that again, it's probably not where we would want it to be. There are multifactorial reasons for that during the last year, but it's something we've really got to focus on in the fiscal climate that we're heading into it. But as has been said before, the ability to land an aeroplane on the head of the pin in our in both our revenue and our capital is something that we absolutely should be applauding across our finance team, but across the trust for those who've delivered to the finances. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard. I'm just wondering, Steve, if there's anything you would like to add in terms of just as we look forward and the challenging times we have within our system partners. I don't feel you have to, but you alluded to it earlier. You might like to add something.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Some of the things we've talked about in previous reports would link directly to our financial sustainability going forward. So the example that we touched on previously about delays in discharging patients that are ready for discharge but are waiting for care to be delivered either in their own home or in bedded care capacity has a range of implications, not just in terms of performance, not just in terms of quality, but directly impact our financial position. So progressing that and having system support and alignment in progressing that, I think, will be an important part of how we manage not just this 12 months, but going forward. The opportunities to transform some of those care pathways with our community partner, Cornwall Partnerships NHS Foundation Trust, but also with the CCG and as it becomes the Integrated Care Board and Cornwall Council will be significantly important. And the opportunities that we can take in terms of demand management, finding earlier ways to intervene, I think will all be absolutely critical. But the scale of the financial challenge facing us, and I think facing many parts of the Southwest and probably many parts of NHS nationally, will require even greater transformation and greater collaboration. So that's going to be a really significant focus for us going forward. And I'm very grateful for the work of everyone in our trust so far in preparing and progressing for that. But as Carl has indicated, moving out of this COVID environment into living with COVID has also impacted on the NHS funding model as we return to more usual methods of funding being provided. So that is absolutely urgent for us to progress.
Thank you, Steve. I think it is worth rehearsing these issues because we can't look at these figures in isolation. We are a nation that is struggling with how we best fund many things, but very particularly this, and that I think it again underlines the value of friends and neighbours and family helping to support people where they can, so that we ensure that the resources we've got are available, in our case, for people who have acute need. Thank you. Alistair, would you like to comment on our front door pressures?
Sorry, Chair. That was just in response to Richard's subsequent question in the chat about why our HSMR is rising, and our HSMR is our mortality rate relative to the rest of the country's mortality rate. And we did see our front door pressures in terms of ambulance queues started a number of weeks before we saw it across the rest of the country. In fact, the Southwest started to see these pressures and problems with not being able to have that flow in about October of last year, and other places in the country saw it a number of weeks, if not months later. So I'm expecting those numbers to come down as other areas in the country are now experiencing the pressures that we've experienced. But we'll get the mortality review group to look at that and to look at what's happening in other trusts, just to be sure. Sorry, it was going back to the last item. I apologise.
Yeah, no, thank you. My fault too. No, that is helpful, and I think what will be useful when we do start to see those statistics, I know they'll come back through quality committee, but it will be good for the board to be appraised of any change, and so we'll perhaps take that as an action. Are there any further questions on the month 12 finance report? In which case, could I ask us to note the position for the year end across the revenue and capital budgets, and noting, of course, that is subject to year end process and external audit. And I think the other point that's come out of the discussion is this point about what a challenging year we're facing, particularly around the savings. So I think we should note that as well, please. So if colleagues would be kind enough to indicate noting in the chat. I'm going to bring us on to item 11, the committee assurance reports, and they will be taken for March and April. And just reminding ourselves and members of the public and staff that our committees work on the behalf of the board and consider a lot of reports, having the opportunity to have a much more in-depth conversation than we have here. So some of the reports are here for formal noting and or approval, and any brief discussion is very welcome. I will take each committee report in turn and assume that we have read them. Obviously, chairs are present should there be any questions, but I'm not going to invite chairs to present. So if I could take item 11.1, which is the Charitable Funds Committee, and are there questions or comments? Sarah, are you coming up for the comment?
Just in case anybody had any comments or questions for me, Mari, I thought I would be.
Thank you, Sarah. No, that's really helpful. And at the moment, I don't have comments. And so if we could please note the items that are being considered by Charitable Funds Committee. And I was particularly struck by the care that the committee had taken in looking at our investments with regard to the various situations in Russia and other parts. So I note that was undertaken. Coming to 11.2, the People and Organisation Development Committee, there was a consideration of risk. So 11.2 we're asked to note, and thank you for noting. And then if we come to 11.3, the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. Coming to 11.4, the Finance and Performance Committee. I think here we need to note the risks identified in regard to the level of clinical risk, which we've just been discussing in terms of the deteriorating quality metrics, and the financial risk with regard escalating cost, particularly with the inflation and supply chain issues. I was lucky to be able to attend that meeting, and the committee did in particular want to note those 2 points. Then if we come to 11.5.1, the Quality Assurance Committee at March and April meetings, and 11.5.2, the latest position on safer staffing. So thank you. I will think of a more a better way of getting all these things noted before our next meeting. I apologise, but thank you very much for those reports being noted, and thank you to the committees for the work that you do to ensure there is a thorough gaining of assurance where it's possible to do so. Sian, I'm aware that we are early on item 12. Have we got Dr. Stratton with us yet, or should we?
We do, Chair. Lindsay's done a fabulous job, and then John is online and ready to go. Thank you.
That's grand. Thank you very much. So can we welcome you, John? You are the guardian of safe working hours for our trust, and perhaps you'd be kind enough to introduce the annual report for 21-22. Thank you.
Hi, I've been logged on for a bit and the connection's been great, except for the last 2 minutes where I've had all these bad quality signs. So I've got another hardwired computer I can go to if it's a disaster. I'm the guardian of safe working. This will be my last annual report because Sarah Coulter is taking over in a transition period between now and October, and then fully from October onwards. So Sarah will be conducting the annual reports. This last year, the effects of COVID have been quite noticeable on the junior doctors. What you'll see on page 6, table 10.1, is the significant escalation in number of exception reports. Don't be alarmed and don't be upset about that. The junior doctors have coped very well during COVID. They've taken on the challenge of working extra hours, and they have done what they should have done, which is exception reports when they work longer. So virtually every single one of those is COVID related in some way. But what we will see, I am sure, is that next year, when the pressures of COVID have diminished, those numbers will drop back, and this will be a blip that we will see. So although I raise it and highlight it, I also reassure that nothing significant is underlying that, other than the inevitable effects of a reduced working number of junior doctors because of COVID. What we have spoken about more this year in the committee and with the medical workforce group, and with Jill Derrick in particular, is the challenge of our medical registrars in the front door. Overnight in particular, it has got busy and busier and busier, and because it's been so slow, I think we can probably say we've been a bit slow to recognise that increasing workload of the registrars overnight, and they have highlighted as a body more firmly this year that we should probably get in line with other trusts of building our workforce for the overnight to cope with the demands of the hospital. That has caused some issues, some exception reports from the registrars, and particularly as numbers of medical registrars have diminished, those that have been left have shouldered that extra responsibility, and apart from maybe one night, we've always had a medical registrar covering the show, or an IMT3 covering the show. But we really need to start thinking ahead from August about boosting our numbers of what the term is being called decision makers through the night. So the registrar is the decision maker, and although they get good support from ITU and hospital at night, from the matron on at night, there needs to be more clinical decision makers. Now, this is why NHS England introduced the IMT3s. They introduced them, and we've got the first ones this year, and it was introduced without finance and without much prelude, other than you've got them from a couple of months onwards. I think largely driven, in fairness, by the finance issue, and they weren't financed. That rather dictated the work schedules that they were given. And as a body, they are all very unhappy about the work schedule that we gave them, because too much of it is on call and very little is developing the skills that they need to become registrars. So running teams, working in clinic, making decisions. So I've put quite a pressure on the medical workforce group to try and align their needs and expectations with our trust's needs and expectations, and that's being evaluated further. So I think for the medical registrars and the IMT3s, they have had a pretty challenging year, it's got to be said. Other than that, what I would say is that because we are, I don't know how they term it, far from London, coastal, we've certainly been granted a few more junior doctors, and I'm pleased to say that we've got 2 new registrars starting this year, and maybe some more registrars. So these are additional posts that can share the burden of the on-call, and the more registrars we have, the more they can continue to learn in their speciality, making them ready for their consultant posts. I've listed in section 3 all the new posts that are coming. what you'll see in that is we've got 6 new foundation level posts. That's the first expansion that we will have taken on, and over the years to come, that will probably increase by another 17. So I think the word I heard is that we were going to get 23 new foundation year 1s. Now, from a hospital point of view, foundation year 1s have a limited capacity, but foundation year 1s become foundation year 2s, IMTs, registrars. So whilst there's a bit of lack of reward, let's say in the first year, very quickly that will roll through, and the hospital will be better equipped with junior doctors in the years ahead. Because of what it is, I will bring up the immediate safety concerns. There have been 2. There have been 2 because of rota changes done by the AMU consultants with best intentions, but unfortunately not communicated to all that needed to know. So when AMU and the admitting medical team worked in new areas, particularly in ED, the consultants make sensible decisions, but because the rota coordinators were unaware, where they moved the people out of weren't backfilled, and that left us exposed, and then on 2 occasions pretty light staffed from what it should have been. They aren't of real concern in that no, the junior doctor population wasn't diminished, it was just in the wrong place, and with COVID going, it's not going to come back. The consultants also knew their responsibility. Well, I thought they did, and then there was another one, but they really do know their responsibility now, so hopefully that's done. The last thing I wanted to mention is just my time will be up in October, so I'm very pleased that Sarah Coulter has been appointed to take over. She's a colleague I've worked with for a number of years, and those of us who know her know that this post will be in very safe hands, working or safe hands with Sarah taking the reins. We've developed this transition period just so that when she finally takes the reins in full, she will have had an opportunity to work with me for 5 or 6 months, so she'll know all the aspects of the job.
Thank you very much, John, as ever, for a really helpful and full report. I have a question, and I can see a couple of people wanting to speak, and then I want to come back at the end. So my question is really simple, and I'm sure it's in hand, but you were talking about action to build the overnight workforce and getting on with that. When is that being done, and who is leading on that? How will we know that we are assured it's in the right place?
So the biggest driving force is Jeremy Hunter, who is our senior clinical resident, and he is liaising essentially with the people that were going to make the difference, which is Jill Derrick and Carl Westgarth. And the plan is to have either a finished rota ready for August or as near finished as it can be. The issue, though, is the finances of that, and once I believe Jill and Carl know the impact of that, they will be taking it through the necessary channels. I think that we are one of the few trusts where we've only got one decision maker, one middle grade on at night. Back in the day, there always only used to be one, but trusts get busier, activity gets busier. So the time has come to do it. The opportunity, we think, will be there in August, finance depending.
I hear the finance depending loudly, but we also know the absolute value. Thank you. Alistair, you would like to come in, and then Sarah Newton.
Yeah, so a couple of things, if I may, Chair. Just to say that this expansion in the medical registrar post in cardiology, GI, rheumatology and palliative medicines is certainly very welcome, and we've got 2 oncology posts coming as well. I think John alluded to sort of the Chris Whitty report and the coastal and rural communities, and the acknowledgement that coastal and rural communities over the years have not done as well as big cities out of lots of things, including the allocation of junior doctors. And having met with Jeff Smith of Health Education England, it's clear that is going to be addressed over the next few years. So we are going to see a constant increase in our F1 and foundation doctor numbers, which, as John quite rightly says, they become our F2s and our ST3s and our registrars and our consultants of the future. And I just wanted to acknowledge really the work that John does alongside our Director of Medical Education around looking after our junior doctors and their education, because we constantly get really good feedback from the national training surveys about how we manage the training of these junior doctors. And we're really good at retaining our people in Cornwall. Once they've been down here, people see the value of working here. And the other thing I just wanted to say was a real thank you to John for being the guardian of safe working for the last 6 years, is it, John? I think it was way before I arrived. He's been a real stalwart and ambassador for the junior doctors and making sure that they get the treatment they deserve. But also to say thank you to Sarah Coulter, who's one of our respiratory consultants, who was the specialty lead for respiratory, who's stepping down from that role and stepping into the Guardian of Safe Working role as of October, as John says. And I'm sure she'll make an excellent successor to John. But thank you, John, for all the work you've done.
Thank you, Alistair, and there are many people repeating that in the chat. Sarah Newton.
Yes, thank you very much. And John, thank you very much indeed for your great care of the junior doctors, because as it's been said, you know, it is a great place for people to study and you know, really get a good start in their future in the NHS because of your work. We do really well with the feedback from junior doctors, so thank you very much indeed. I'm putting on my Ockington Ned hat here and hoping that for the considerations of 24-hour coverage, that we're mindful of our need to have obstetricians on call for the maternity services. And that has come out in the Ockington report as something that is needed. And I know it's been identified as something that we do need for investment in the trust, but I've been told that it's very much dependent on external Ockington funding. And so if there is a review overall for our need for decision makers and consultants to be available at night time, whether we'll just don't forget them. Don't forget how important babies don't wait to be born. They do arrive when they want to arrive.
Thank you, Sarah. Point well made, and I'm sure John will take that forward. Are there any further questions for you, John? No, in which case it leaves me to say thank you, a real heartfelt thank you. It feels as if almost as long as I've been at the Trust, you've been here doing this report for us, and you do offer great assurance, both in the way that you present it and in the material that you include. But I would like to echo Alistair in saying it isn't just that, it is the way you look after people and the care that you offer. And I think, and I've heard you say over the years, it's also that you listen, and it's such a good example of how we do freedom speak up in other areas. But you know, when people do make a report, you do listen with compassion and care and make sure that people get an answer. And I think sometimes it's that triangulation that makes people feel cared for. And I too have experienced people speaking of how well our juniors are looked after here, and a lot of that is down to your leadership. And so I don't know whether you'll be pleased or not pleased, not any longer to have this role, but you'll be able to focus on other things, I'm sure. And if I could formally give the thanks of the board to yourself and the best wishes to Sarah. So thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your words.
Okay, it really is a pleasure. Can I ask colleagues on the board, please, to note the annual report from John as Guardian of Safe Working Hours. Great. We are a little early for our break, but I propose that we do take a break now. I hope that doesn't adversely influence Jo with her report, but I think we can probably let her know. So I'm going to be massively generous. We are a little before 2:45. Can we please come back a couple minutes before midday? Because we have put in a 15-minute break in regard of what a lengthy meeting this is. So if we could be here, absolutely ready to start just a moment before 12 o'clock, that would be great. Thank you, everybody, very much. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for being back promptly. And I hope you are a little refreshed. I've got a strange echo. Okay, it's gone away. I'm working in different offices myself today, and it's amazing. I was presented with a piece of birthday cake at the break, which I wasn't expecting. So great advantage to working away from my home. Lovely. So we come to item 13, please, the Maternity Services Safety Report, which includes the final Ockenden Review report. I'm first of all going to ask Kim, our Dual Director of Nursing, Midwifery and Allied Health Professional, to introduce the item, and I'm then going to ask Sarah Newton, who is our Maternity Safety Champion. Before asking Kim to speak, I just want to remind us that in this paper it is very important that we do formally acknowledge the final report from the Ockenden Review, and there is a hyperlink included in the papers. But also, if I could draw to our attention the need for us as a board to seek assurance from that final Ockenden Review report on exactly how the Trust has ensured a robust assessment of staffing levels in maternity, and how the Trust is supporting a culture where all staff feel safe and supported to speak up. So those are the two particular areas for our attention, but I know there are other matters in the report, Kim. So if I could first ask you to present it for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I thought I had a bit of an echo then. So firstly, can I say that there has been, the data is from March. There's been one patient safety incident investigation which is contained in the report, and it's really important that we realise that we have used the type of investigation we've used is definitely done so we don't interview the parents multiple times, which is really important and gives that support. So we take every case very seriously, but we also have to take into account how we support the parents at this very, very difficult time. I will come back to some of that a little later. So we've had no maternal deaths during March and one stillbirth, which you can see is currently still under review, but all immediate actions have been taken as contained within the report. We've had one neonatal death, sadly, and all immediate actions have been taken as contained within the report. We, as part of that case, we've used the perinatal mortality review tool. So that's really, really important to make sure that whilst we're supporting, we're getting to the root cause of the issues. And we've had the family have been supported by our bereavement team. That's really key, critical at this very, very difficult stage, and our deepest condolences go out to the parents. This case has also been part of a system roundtable review. The initial investigation roundtable was held on the 12th of April, and whilst we've taken immediate actions, there will be county-wide actions that will be reported probably in more detail next month. And we've had no incidents that are graded as moderate and above. So for our maternity dashboard, it is RAG rated amber. No surprise, and I will go into a little bit more detail. The reds are staffing, appraisals, our obstetric sickness and absence rates, and our pregnant women who have a BMI over
50. But I must say this is a very, very small percentage of our population, and we only have 2 women on this pathway at the moment, so it's just to acknowledge that. Staffing, as you know, we have reported, at least from the very, very beginning of our maternity safety reports, that our risks around staffing. It must be noted, however, that our vacancies still remain low. In fact, I think it's about 4 whole-time equivalents. We have 16 new midwives qualifying very shortly. And we know that we've been actively doing the Birth Rate Plus regularly, as we committed to do, and that has shown a shortfall of 20. And so we fully expect to take all 16 of our newly qualified midwives, which is excellent news. And we will have the support to make sure that they have a safe transition into their midwifery practice as well. However, our maternity leave rates have been really high, and the teams have been absolutely decimated over the last 2 months with the impact of COVID on all members. It's not just obstetrics and midwives, it's across the board. We have a full report coming to May QAC, which is Quality Assurance Committee, and a full staffing report coming to board in June, which is in line with Occupational. But as a board, we have always had staffing high on the agenda. We have done the full Birth Rate Plus, which is a national staffing tool for the last 3 years, and that was part of our commitment when the maternity services went into inadequate CQC rating. We did an absolute full scale review of not just numbers, of skills, specialist skills and numbers, and we continue as a board to be committed to that. Appraisals, it's no surprise with the special measures that we have in place and the extra support that we have to our teams, that appraisals has remained problematic. However, I am pleased to see that those numbers have slightly increased in month and will increase next month. The team absolutely understand that this is important for staff health and well-being as well, but we have to consider the safe staffing levels within all of our birth centres as well as our main hospital, which is key critical. Occupational has 2 red rag rating, and that is outlined in the report. And as you said, Chair, the final report was received at the end of March, and we were confident that we were already reviewing our staffing levels and will be reported as such. The action plan for Occupational, Kirkup, CNST and Saving Babies' Lives will continue to be reported monthly through this report, and there is a very, very strong and robust auditing plan in place with the central governance team as well as our maternity team to make sure we're getting the right assurance, not reassurance, and reporting measures up through board. The report, I'm going to say, highlights, and there are 2 things, and it's quite fortuitous we've got the Freedom to Speak Up annual report today. As a board, we need to consider 2 things. The importance of creating a culture where staff feel safe and supported to be able to speak up. But every organisation, us included, must have a robust FTSU training programme for all managers and leaders, and regular listening events should be embedded within our culture. And I think if we keep that in mind when we hear the FTSU annual report, and we might want to discuss that a little bit more fully after that, but it's really, really important. Occupational has lessons that are wider, and there will be a wider report coming through, but not to lose the importance and the impact of this on our maternity services and the population that we serve. The Kirkup submission went in at the same time at the end of March. There is 1 amber that we are working on. There's the Clinical Negligence Scheme for Trust, CNST, has 2 reds, which we are actively working on, and Saving Baby's Life has one standard, which is RED, which is the reduction in smoking during pregnancy. And we know that we were making stronger strides before COVID. This has always been difficult in Cornwall, and we have now reviewed, refreshed, and that programme will start anew going forward, and we will work hard to be able to reduce those. And before I hand over to Sarah, it's just acknowledging that Sarah is our non-executive representative, and she has been back on site and had a very, very busy month, and I will hand over to her for more detail.
Thank you very much, Kim. That's a really helpful report, and I know there will be points that people want to raise. But before we do, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief because Kim did such a good job with such a comprehensive report. But to answer your question specifically, Mari, around the culture of enabling staff to feel they're able to raise any issues of concern without it having an adverse impact on them, I think that is really important. And I do observe all of the clinical governance meetings, and I've actually been into a face-to-face meeting where we are reviewing, sadly, when something has gone wrong, where we haven't delivered the quality of care that we had wanted to. And what I did observe firsthand was a very open culture, an honest, appropriately challenging and robust conversation that was had there with people from outside the trust who support our staff to properly learn from when things don't go as we hope them to. So I have seen that myself, but it's something we should never be complacent about and always wanting to promote, especially as we're going to be welcoming so many new members of staff onto the team, the new midwives. We want them to know right from the get-go that it's a learning culture, a supportive culture, and they can raise concerns. When I was visiting the unit in the hospital, we did observe that we didn't have the freedom to speak up posters on the walls. It wasn't clear who staff could contact. But the new director of midwife, Sally, and I agreed that this would be something that we would do, and that she would reach out to our FTSE Guardian and do some work with that team so that they understood that that was also a possibility. Obviously want people to raise their concerns with their managers and with the matrons, with their colleagues around them, but also that they have the opportunity, if they don't want to do that or don't feel able to do that, that there is also the FTSE people there who can support them. So I think that that's going to be remedied quite quickly, and I'm very much looking forward to going out with, I think, Kim and definitely Sally. We're doing a road trip, and we're going out for a day with the community midwives and seeing the birthing centres outside the hospital. So I shall look forward to that day and being reporting back as appropriate in due course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And for the benefit of members of the public, the fact that we do have Sarah in this role is for the absolute purpose of giving the assurance or raising the issues as you have done this morning. And it's good to hear you're doing that, and thank you. And I think it's a joy to be able to be back on site, isn't it? So that's marvellous. I haven't got people indicating yet, but Kim, perhaps I could I may not have been listening properly, but you said that we've got 16 newly qualified midwives joining us, which is fantastic. But I think you said that the gap that we'd identified was 20. Is that right? So what are we doing about the other 4? You're muted, Kim.
Is that better? Oh, thank you. You're absolutely right, Chair. So we still have 4 whole-time equivalents. We are out to national recruitment. We have also joined the pilot for international recruitment for midwives as well. So fully recognising that having all 16 will exhaust local, we have looked at returning to practice midwives. We've looked nationally further afield, as we are all aware. So another string to our bow will be looking at international
recruitment as well. Not to forget as well, and we've kept it deliberately separate, that the 20 was just to stand still with our current complex caseload. To be able to fully implement the requirements for continuity of carer, that will be part of the staffing paper that will come through POD, QAP and then onto board. We fully recognise there's a further shortfall.
Thank you, Kim. And if I could just press you a little further, we're out to recruit and we're considering other routes. Have you do you have a sort of feel for what timescale there would be around that?
So it will probably be within, it sounds a long time, but between 3 and 6 months. With the further impact of what continuity of care will be, I think we have to be pragmatic. However, what we are looking at, especially in our post-delivery suite, is the role of a general nurse, for example. Our maternity support workers, the work they are doing cannot be underestimated, and we are one of the front runners. So further recruiting, working with Sally now, who's our Director of Midwifery, it is looking at other blended roles or maybe specialist roles that we could recruit into that will help swell those numbers, that releases the midwives to do the work that they absolutely have to do. So we're not leaving any stone unturned, but fully recognise that it won't be an easy solution.
Thank you. You anticipated my next question there, so yeah. Thank you.
So Mari, could I just quickly say about, we haven't really spent much time in this conversation about the service user and their voice and how important that is to all of us, and how well supported we are by Nicola Burnett of the Maternity Lives Matter local partnership, who really supports the staff, really enables us to hear the service user's voice so well. And I think, and I would like, the opportunity of this report to put on record a huge appreciation for the work that she does.
Yeah, it's a great organisation with some great people in it. So thank you, Sarah. Steve, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you. I'd echo that observation by Sarah as well. So it's exceptional that we have that support, that engagement and that voice. So certainly grateful for that. It's a really comprehensive report, and that's really helpful and significant progress being made. Two questions, if it's okay, Kim. Firstly, on the 2 red actions, I'm very mindful they're dependent and require regional level pathways to be in place. So firstly, is there anything more that we can do as a board to support and help accelerate that regionally?
We are working collaboratively. We're hoping that we'll hear something quite soon, Steve. So if it doesn't, it's already been raised as a national level, but I'll keep the board and yourself posted.
I'm very grateful for that, and at any point very happy to provide any further support or any assistance if that's necessary. And then just a more general question for you and for Sarah, is there anything further as a board that we can do that's not already in place in terms of progressing these matters, particularly the Ockenden action plan?
I think, as the board well knows, we had to put out a special communication to our staff as regards staffing during the COVID. So that was in place for 4 weeks. From Monday, we have considered, and there will be a further briefing going out, that we need to be able to do that for a further 4 weeks. While some staff have returned, there's still a large percentage of staffing off. We haven't put any additional measures in, so we haven't taken down anything further than we said. And in fact, we've been able to put 2 measures back in place. However, we still need to continue to support our maternity services during this difficult time. And they're very, very appreciative of having our support to be able to do the reductions they've been required to do, and the MVP have been a part of that every step of the way to make sure we're getting the right communication out to our parents, most importantly, and for them still to be able to make full decisions, but knowing the risks that take place, such as, for example, home birth
should we have queuing ambulances, we've got a really robust measure that people can still make their decision, but it's risk assessed.
Yep.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I haven't got other questions or comments at the moment. This may be too early to say, but how are we measuring or have we measured the effectiveness of the Let's Talk programme, particularly with regards to this discipline? Will we know if it's making a difference? Muted, Kim.
I wonder if someone's trying to tell me something today. We've been extremely fortunate. It'll be too early for the Let's Listen programme, but we've been doing cultural aspects of work within maternity for the last 3 years. So we've got quite a robust programme. What I've asked Sally to do as part of the next Occupation, which is quite fortuitous, is just to give us a refresh of where we are.
Right.
As Sarah says, they are not backwards in coming forwards because we've had this platform in place, but definitely with some of the challenges they've faced, we need to make sure they've got that additional support to be able to have their voice listened to should they need to. So I'll make sure that that's part of the next safer maternity report, because that's a key part of this.
It is. Thank you. So, colleagues, sorry, Sarah.
So I suppose the only thing I would add, Mari, is I looked very carefully at the staff survey results for this care group, and the care group is large in maternity services because it has paediatrics in there and neonates. So, but actually, if you look at the staff survey results from this part of the trust, they're some of the best results. Now, I know the board would like higher levels of engagement from our staff and even more feedback, and we're not going to be happy until 100% of the staff, tell us and share with us their experiences of working in the trust. But the performance there was amongst the best in the trust, which gave me some comfort, in addition to the meetings that I attend and the behaviour that I observe, that it is a culture there where people do feel able to raise things in a sort of non-blame type of culture, which is what we want to see, a learned culture, a supportive culture, while not wanting to be complacent and knowing there's always more we can do, but just using the data that is already there.
Yeah, thank you. And Kim, as you acknowledged earlier, it actually isn't that many years and since this was seen to be an inadequate service. And I would like to acknowledge not just what your teams have done, but what you've done personally in making sure this service is absolutely fit for purpose and can continue to improve. So thank you for what you do. Colleagues, can I ask then board colleagues to check whether you are sufficiently assured on particularly those 2 questions that I raised, and if so, then I invite you to note the current position as laid out in the report, and the updated position which came to us in March, to note the national final Ockenden report, which we did receive at the end of March, and that the maternity service is currently undertaking a baseline assessment against the new recommendations, that we should discuss the questions and therefore also that we note the measures in place to ensure safe midwifery staffing. And I perhaps would add to that the assurance we've had from Kim about more innovative ways of covering the gaps that we've got. So colleagues, if you'd be good enough to note, sorry, my messages are not moving up as quickly as they should. So I apologise. Thank you for noting, and I see that we're asking Bedworth and House to go on mute when required, as you can. Thank you. Our next item is item 14, which is our annual complaints report 21-22. And I'm going to invite Bernie, our Director of Integrated Governance, to introduce the item. And then I'm going to invite Ruth, as our Chair of Quality Assurance Committee, to summarise the areas of assurance sought by that committee. so as we don't duplicate the discussion at the board, because a lot of work has been done on this. We do have a statutory duty as regard complaints, and that's why this annual report comes to the board. Although, as I've just said, there is good discussion of it through our committee structure. So Bernie, if I could invite you first, please.
Thanks, Mary. I'd just like to kind of flag, I think, the main theme that comes out from this in relation to the impact of the pandemic and the ongoing operational challenges, particularly in the last 6 months of the year, is beginning to impact in terms of what our patients feel like to be on the receiving end of us during these circumstances. We've seen a 25% increase in complaints in comparison to the previous year, and that I think is significant. The positives, and I want to thank our patient experience teams and the leadership of the heads of nursing who hold the accountability for this in the care groups, is that the majority of those have been handled informally. And I think that's really positive that people are getting local resolution because of timely contact to resolve people's issues. Acknowledgement remains good, and response times averaged out at about 75% over the year, which was an improvement on last year. But we're still looking for ways to see about how we can get to 95%. An area of concern is that 50 complaints were reopened last year, and we're doing a deep dive in relation to that is going to our patient experience group in March. It's really important to understand what else we can do to make sure that we get resolution at the earliest point. But what we haven't seen is an increase in our formal complaints going up over the year, or where patients or their families have not been satisfied, where they felt they needed to go to the parliamentary and have some where we've just had one case. The communication, access and waiting times are the key themes. Obviously, opening up visiting should have positive impact in relation to that. But as part of the conversations that we've had through QUAC, there is a comprehensive communication action plan to try and pick up some of the areas that can be influenced by the patient experience team and the heads of nursing. And one of those things is about how we develop a standardised approach to communication at ward level. So where we've tested that out through the pandemic, in certain areas we've seen a significant decrease in the number of complaints in relation to communication. So that will be our focus over the coming months, and that will be, and QUAC will get a regular update in relation to that. Other priorities that we're going to focus on is around the new PHSA complete standards and its application, but also about how we can get feedback. So what's really important about this is local resolution. What does it feel like to be on the receiving end of us through this process? And we still have quite low participation rates in terms of our complaint survey, so we're going to particularly focus on looking at alternative ways that we can get feedback, and again look at some continuous improvement in those particular areas. So challenging year, but really proud of the teams in terms of what they've been able to do in terms of trying to maintain prompt contact and early resolution on the background of an increase in terms of the numbers of complaints across the year. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Bernie, and thank you for a good report. Ruth, would you like to help us with what was covered at the committee?
Yes, thank you, Mari. We had a really good discussion about this area, and particularly just want to highlight that, as Bernie mentioned, not only did we have this paper, we also had a paper around the thematic review of communication, which had come up through the patient experience group, and reviewed the action plan. And it's important, isn't it, that as a board and as a committee that we recognise that while we're talking about complaints, these are people at the end of this, and the importance of what they want to get from, why they're raising this, and what we can do both to help them in that process, and the amount of work that's done through informal resolution is really important, because often that's just about listening to people and understanding what's happened and what's gone wrong. The committee were assured about the work being done and the action plan around communication and the standardised approach, and then we hope that that work will then progress even further into the work that's happening around shared decision making, etc., so that the communication becomes really involving the patient in every step of their journey, and so that they're not having to ask, they're being involved, and they're part of that process. So the committee discussed and endorsed the annual complaints report for onward approval at the Trust Board.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And as I was able to be there, I know there was a really good conversation on this. While other folk are deciding whether or not they have anything more to ask, I suppose, Bernie, communications has been on the top of the list of complaints pretty well as long as I've been here, hasn't it? And it's really good to hear about that new policy, Ruth. How are we monitoring and how frequently are we monitoring to know whether our new communications is being effective and is doing what we're hoping it to be done?
So we'll be
Sorry, I'm a bit of echo there, Maury. So we'll be monitoring it monthly. So through the improvement approach that we are taking with the care group. So we'll disaggregate the data down. We'll be able to see that in terms of the impacts of some of the changes that we're trying to make, or the teams are trying to make.
That's helpful, Bernie, thank you. My other question is, I really liked the section 7 on page, I think it's 10 of the report, the examples of improvement and learning. Really, really helpful to see that. How is that learning shared across the trust? How do people benefit from all of that?
So it's shared through the patient. So heads of nursing attend patient experience groups. So there's cross learning through there that people can take back through their care groups. And there's also, we use the patient experience newsletter to disseminate learning. Occasionally we'll use the blogs to pick out something in particular, or we'll use snapcoms. One of the key successes of this year, particularly the second half of the year, is the introduction of the pink baskets across the organisation in relation to property. So you'll see that that was a significant issue for us over the course of last year, but you can see very clearly through the run chart of the month-on-month improvement since those baskets have been introduced. So we use our existing mechanisms and also encourage the care groups to disseminate that down through their specialty care groups, specialty governance meetings as well.
Thank you, Bernie. And sorry, I'm on a roll at the moment. The other thought that occurred to me when I was looking at the communications issues again is how can the board be assured that people are using sort of active listening and all the other ways of communicating? So I think one of the issues for patients, as we all know, is that we don't always listen well. We're not always in a good state to listen, and sometimes we don't speak up when we should. So are we using all of those various communication techniques, particularly around active listening?
I think so. I'm trying to think about how I don't think we can be assured all of the time that that's happening, because we wouldn't see that through our theme in terms of complaints, but also through some of our other areas as well, particularly in relation to claims and litigation. So I think we've got areas where we've got good practice, but there's still work for improvement. Until we start to see some of this come down, I can't say that we can be wholly assured in that regard.
Yeah. I think that's an absolutely fair appraisal, and I think we should also note as a board that the fact that we have got a large number of complaints isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's good that people are feeling that they can raise issues with us. So it's always a mixed picture, isn't it? So I don't appear to have further indications of questions. So thanking you for the report. There was obviously a good discussion at the committee, Ruth. So we are asked to have discussed and to approve the annual complaints report and to discuss and note the increase in complaints as we've just been discussing. Finally, we asked to discuss and endorse the actions being taken in relation to communication falling under the patient experience portfolio. And I think, Ruth, you've spoken well on that. So thank you, colleagues. If we can acknowledge things there, that will be really helpful. Yeah, Bernie, thank you. Your point about the shared decision making is really, really helpful. Right, so if we come on to item 15 and thank Joe Burton for coming forward a little bit earlier, you're going to present to us the Freedom to Speak Up annual report, and I know that you have a 5-minute video to show us. I think it really is worth noting, and to your credit and that of your team, that the external well-led governance review report commended our robustness in terms of our arrangements for Freedom to Speak Up. And that is a real compliment, because the team sees an awful lot of trust. So with that in mind, can I ask you to present the report, please, Joe? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So assuming everyone's read the report, there are just 2 notes that I'd really like to highlight before we go on to questions and the video. So firstly, I'd just really like to note that obviously a large proportion of my report is about data and numbers. Clearly, that's a really rich source of information for us that we can learn a lot from. But I'd just like us all to consider that behind every single one of those numbers is one of our colleagues who has often had to dig really, really deeply before they come and speak up to either myself or to Kim or to one of the champions, or, you know, whoever the member of staff is. And I just wanted to highlight and appreciate really how much courage and resilience that can take, particularly in some of the more complex cases that myself and Kim are often dealing with. And then the second point I'd like to highlight is around our culture. So we're all responsible for our culture. And I just feel it's really important for us to continue with energy our focus around culture improvement, and really important that we put our people before processes. We really need to listen with gratitude and respond with great curiosity, I would say, when people want to come and speak up to us, rather than responding with defensiveness and feeling criticised when colleagues want to raise their concerns with us. And I've just completed the new training module for senior leaders, which is called Follow Up. That will be available for everyone very soon on our ESR programme. But one of the questions that training asks us to consider is, what is it like to have a conversation round here? And it just really made me think. So I'm spreading that question to everyone to ask, you know, in their wards, in their offices, in their departments, wherever it is you work in the hospital, because I just think it's a really important question that we continue to ask ourselves. And if it feels safe to have a conversation, and a conversation is welcomed, our staff are much more likely to come and have a quick word with us, or to come and, you know, discuss a really serious concern with us. Yeah, those are my 2 points. So I'm happy to take any questions.
And points very well made, Joe. Thank you. I do, from time to time, have people saying, you know, is it all right to speak up? Can we? And it's been really good to be able to give assurance that I've heard people saying what a good experience they've had from yourself and your team. Just before we go on to the new video, I suppose one of the things that occurred to me, and it has in previous years, is I know these matters are largely confidential, and so they should be, but something that is occasionally said to me is, oh, it's so hard to speak up, and anyway, nothing happens if you do. And I counter that and say, well, no, that's not right. But is there any way we could get better at letting the wider organisation know that we do take action?
So I think all of the training modules that are live now cover that. So particularly Listen Up, the training module for managers, really reinforces how important it is to give people feedback when they've spoken up. And I think a lot of the time we are not always very good at that. So I know that I do that, and the champions do that, and Kim does that, but I think sometimes people speak up and don't get that feedback and therefore feel like nothing's been done. So I hear that quite often from colleagues, I've spoken up before and nothing's been done, but you're kind of my last ditch attempt at it. So I think it's talking more about speaking up, how important it is. I keep coming back to the training, but it's so important, and that's mandatory now for all of our staff. So that's really positive. I also introduced speaking up at our induction, and I talk about the importance of feedback there. So hopefully new colleagues coming into the organisation will know that that's what we do, that's what we should be doing. So I think it's talking about it more and just keep having the conversations.
I'm sorry, I just got one more point, which is around whether some of the whether you feel all parts of our trust are covered in this way, because I think we know there are parts where there is a lot of conversation and debate, but we also know there are departments where perhaps things are a bit quieter and maybe people are. So how do we know we're getting good coverage across the trust? Yeah,
so definitely more work needed, because yes, it's easier to have a conversation in certain areas than it is in others. I completely agree with that. And I do my best, and it's been more of a challenge in COVID times to go out and about in the hospital. But I would hopefully like to get back to doing more of that, and more just dropping into teams and sort of introducing myself. So I've got a plan to do that in maternity, and just sort of a bit of a refresh really about speaking up and what it means and how you do it and why it's important.
And I know that board colleagues will absolutely be pleased themselves to be getting back to getting around the trust, and we can continue that work too. And Alison, thank you. You put a comment there. Sometimes there's a follow-up action such as mediation. Would you like to say a little more about that?
Yes, I mean, sometimes the people and OD team will link with Joe to support actions such as facilitation of where a relationship has broken down, or actually follow-up mediation. Sometimes as a result of raising a concern, then an investigation happens as well. So it depends on the nature of what it has been raised, and certainly from my perspective on joining the trust, I think Joe and the Guardians do a fantastic job here. The other thing I was just going to suggest in the chat as well is we're just in the process of refreshing our approach to pulse surveys. So maybe one point in the future we could ask a question in terms of the what you raised, Chair, in terms of coverage. Could be a way of perhaps doing this.
Thank you, Alison. That's really helpful. Kim, you were wanting to come in.
So I think what Joe says is really important. A lot of the cases we hear, sometimes it's because the feedback is difficult to give. So we've got to empower our staff, not just to listen. We can't, in the nicest possible way, sometimes we can't fix everything, but it is having that confidence to go back and give maybe not the message that's going to be want to heard, but how we support them giving that message, because a lot of it then just boils up into frustration. Whereas, so I think we've got some considerable work to do about how staff once again have those difficult face-to-face meetings. I think the pandemic, we've got some catching up to do with lots of things that the pandemic have caused some cessation to or restriction to, I think, and that comfortableness. You know, Joe and I and Susan heard a case the other day, and their first reaction was, Teams, no, let's get together safely in a room and do it face to face, because you can't give a tissue through a screen. It is about getting some of that good old-fashioned face-to-face and comfort back in the room, that, and sometimes reading body language as well. Have you answered, or are they still all closed in? And are you confident that once they've laid their soul bare sometimes and are feeling very vulnerable, that they're supported when they go home and have support? But I think it goes back to the two Ockenden questions, doesn't it, as well? You know, the importance of creating the culture where all staff feel safe and supported and are able to speak up, that we have a robust FTSE training programme and all managers and leaders are able to have that training, and then the listening events. And I think you've heard Joe say, and I'm in agreement, we've still got work to do. You know, we've got an amazing foundation, and the numbers, Joe and I were talking yesterday, the numbers are increasing and quite radically increasing. So we need to do some thematic understanding of some of the actions we need to take. But most importantly, we've been doing a business case, because Joe is incredible. Sorry to embarrass you, Joe, absolutely incredible, but she's under severe strain and stress about especially doing the follow-up. Some of these are really complex, and we don't want people to feel heard, listened to, and then left. So we will be bringing the business case through quite radically for some support.
That's a really important point, Kim. Thank you, and we will have that in mind when that comes through. And I think what you're just saying about giving feedback to people does go back to what we were saying about the appraisal and how we do create that culture of ready feedback. You know, best said at the time, no better time than doing it immediately. So thank you. I don't think we've got others except for Steve. We've got you. You'd like to question?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Mary and Kim. And it builds on the last 2 points. I think there's strong evidence to say that culture starts with the board. And the tone that's set from the top of the organisation. The ability to transform that culture is directly dependent on our teams right across the organisation, but the board do have a particular and a very important role to play here. So one of the questions I had for Joe and for Kim is there anything further you think the board can do? And I think that point you just touched on, Kim, the business case, and that's referred to in the report for consideration of a second champion. I think that's really powerful. But is there anything else that either of you think the board can or should be doing, particularly with that role that we have to set the tone from the top?
I think from my point of view, when you are all out and about and having conversations with staff, just to talk about speaking up would be great. And, you know, do they know about my role? And if they don't, and if that area needs more input, then please let me know and I'll arrange them, you know, drop-in sessions, etc. But yeah, just to be talking about it and encouraging people to be having conversations with their line manager in the first instance, and, you know, kind of supporting those difficult conversations as well.
I think Steve, Joe and I started the once a month having the freedom to speak up Teams talk with one of the execs, and I'm sure we can open it out to the non-execs. They have been incredibly powerful, and I think if more of us did those, we could probably do 2 a month, and those are very, very bespoke. We have a vast array of people who join, but actually sometimes there's comfort in numbers, and for me it gets away from the app in confidence is really good, but some of these drop-ins actually you know who's talking, because I feel really sad, and sometimes I reach out, and I know Bernie does and I know you do, to say, please give me your name, how do I come back to you? Because one of the biggest things you can't do is go back in any meaningful way when it seems very perfunctory. So the more we can get people to feel there is no reprisal, and sometimes I'm not speaking out of turn where some people still feel there is that culture. So the more we can get, and really, if anyone wants to do one of the speak ups with Joe or myself, please give a shout and we can do them more regularly.
I could completely agree, Kim. I've been to some of those sessions and they really are worth going to. And I know that staff appreciate non-execs going to the sessions. So I'm sure you'll have non-execs willing to come forward. I think, Joe, we should go on with your video, and then I don't know quite why my colleagues are being quite so quiet today. There must be a really good set of papers, but I can't see you, so I don't know whether you're content or not. So please speak up.
Yeah, I'm content. I'm content.
Wouldn't it be great if one day we didn't need a freedom to speak up guardian or an executive or non-executive champion, that our staff would be able to speak freely and openly, and we should never forget that, and hopefully that will be our ambition. Listening to the stories, and often these are not easy stories to hear, and sometimes I wonder, how did we get it so wrong? We saw the signs, why didn't we intervene before? But the fact that people still feel brave and have the courage to come and speak to Joe, myself and the other Freedom to Speak Up champions is inspirational, and we need to hear and actively listen and be able to make meaningful change so people feel that they're able to talk closer to the incident or what's troubling them. They shouldn't have to seek information or guidance or ask for support that either comes from Joe, myself, but could have come from their line manager, a colleague or a friend. And I hope today that you think about this as you listen to the stories, weave their tapestry, that golden thread together, and that we come out with some meaningful outcomes that will truly make a difference for our staff who work so passionately and often against the odds to hear their voice and change their experience.
I witnessed unsafe practice while in a different area to my usual workplace. I tried to challenge it at the time by speaking to a more senior nurse, but I wasn't listened to. I knew there was a real danger to patient safety, but I was worried about getting people into trouble, whether I might be seen as being difficult or if it might impact negatively on me. As a visitor to the area, I felt I didn't have the confidence to speak up about something I knew was wrong. I felt torn between wanting to be an advocate for safe patient care, but also wanting to support colleagues and work as a team.
I'm going to be seen as a troublemaker. I've spoken up before and nothing has changed.
As a new member of staff, I wasn't quite sure if it was the right thing to do or if it was already getting sorted, and I would have been seen as interfering, but it seems it was right to speak up. I was treated amazingly, and the team I was concerned about have got the support they needed. If I had spoken up sooner, it may not have gotten so bad, and a valuable team member may not have left.
I have learned so much about myself along this journey, all for the good. I would recommend Freedom to Speak Up to anyone. It is a really powerful tool. I spoke up to protect others for the future, not to feel the same as I did. I spoke up not only for myself, but to stop others experiencing what I did. I wanted to speak up to improve things, not to get others into trouble. I wanted to make things better for all.
It moved mountains. It's been a very slow process, but my goodness, what a difference it made. Thank you.
I felt at a loss before I came to Freedom to Speak Up. I was desperate. I didn't know where else to go.
I have found my confidence again. It has made things so much better. I am relieved I spoke up. I can hold my head up high that I did the right thing.
Thank you, Joe. That's absolutely a brilliant video. Really, really good. It ought to be going on to Team Talk, couldn't it? A few times, just as so it's so short. It would be a lovely thing to put on Team Talk. Ruth, do you want to say what you're just saying there on the chat? It's a lovely comment.
Thanks. I just picked up on that phrase you said, Joe, as you were talking to us, that we should listen with gratitude and follow up with curiosity. I think that's fantastic. And you know, hearing you again today, whenever you come to board, and seeing you in the work that you do, it's really fabulous what you do every day and you continue to do. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, colleagues, Joe, thank you so much for that and what you do. There's lots of nice comments there. And so if we then come to looking to what we're being asked to do here, we were asked to discuss a note for assurance, the annual report 21-22, and discuss and note the increasing trend of behaviours and relationships, although on a downward trend, as this has been a main category of concern over the year. And I think what you noted, Joe, is that we can't underestimate the effect and possibly the ongoing effect of how hard it's been through COVID. So thank you, colleagues, for noting the report. Grateful for that. And Joe, as ever, I'll say you're more than welcome to stay with us, but you've probably got better things to do. Thank you to your team from us. That brings us to item 16, the Senior Information Risk Owner Annual Report 21-22. And I'm going to ask Bernie, as our Director of Integrated Governance, just to introduce the item. And then, Ruth, if I may, I'll come to you as Chair of QAC to summarise the areas of assurance discussed by your committee. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mary. So as I outlined at QAC, I think this has been the organisation's most challenging year in terms of information governance and also about management in terms of cybersecurity. In my 4 years as CIRO, and there were kind of three main areas that I've kind of highlighted in the report. Cybersecurity remains, I think, one of our greatest risks. We've done a huge amount of work over the year in terms of trying to bring down our end-of-life operating systems, and that needs to be kind of our continued area of focus as we move towards a new electronic paper record. Cybersecurity, in terms of the high level of alerts that come out from NHS Digital, are becoming more frequent. And I'll give an example. We're managing 2 down currently and still trying to close down a third in terms of the log shell one. The frequency in which these are coming down and the capacity that it takes up in terms of our SITS team is increasing, and it diverts them away from their kind of core business as usual activity. So and I don't, and neither would Kerwin say, we don't expect that to decrease. And I think as a board we just need to be mindful of that, and the cyber operations business case that will come through next year. I think within that it's really important that we continue to raise the profile of cybersecurity with our staff across the 3 sites and across the system, to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that staff are better educated about how they manage information that's come through that has the potential to be malicious. The other area that I'm flagging in terms of a risk is trust staff accessing information without a legitimate reason to do so has increased over the year. We're not an outlier with that. We're seeing it regionally and we're seeing it nationally. It's the top reported incident to the ICO. We've strengthened systems and are strengthening our systems. One, about how we can track that more proactively, but two, in particular about how we track through to induction. People have completed their induction training. The numbers of staff that we've dismissed for this over the course of the last year has increased, all cases are approached through a just cultural point of view. But in terms of what can the board do, it's about being really clear that staff should not be accessing information that they don't have a legitimate reason to do so. And I think we need to remain strong in terms of that approach. And the other area that has caused significant issue for the team over the course of the last year is the significant increase in subject access requests and some of the complexity around that. So we've put in additional infrastructure. We're trying to see if there's anything further that we can do to simplify the multiple systems that the teams have to use. But importantly, with going back to BAU around COVID, we hope to get the team in one place to improve efficiency, because home working has had a negative impact around that. And I think the other bit to say is we submitted a compliance toolkit last year, and we're in the process of looking at that this year. I always say to the teams, you know, it's no mean feat, and I think for this year in particular, it's been really challenging. So I am really grateful to not only just my information governance team, but to Calvin and to the SITS team, who we work with really closely, for all of the work that they've done this year in terms of trying to manage down the existing risks that we've got in relation to this area. And I'll hand over to Ruth.
Thanks, Bernie.
Yeah, thanks, Bernie. We had a good discussion around this at the quality assurance group, and we talked particularly around the projects in place and the plans that are there to mitigate the risks around cybersecurity, and to assure ourselves that they're being undertaken in a timely fashion. And we also gave some considerable time and attention to the issue of our staff accessing information that then they're not entitled to do as part of their work, and discussed about mandatory training and the importance of it in this area. But it's essentially we endorsed the report for onward progression to the board.
Thank you very much, Ruth. I note, Calvin, that you're here with us. I know you're here all the time. You're on the screen. Is there anything further that you would like to add? Perhaps I could ask a question before I ask you, because you probably know the answer. I am puzzled about how people do access information that they shouldn't. And I'm wondering if we have sufficient safety in that. And then any other comments you'd like to make, Calvin?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the issue in terms of accessing information that you're not entitled to is that there's a balance between the information being available to clinicians, particularly in terms of emergency situations. So if we locked everything down so that you could only access a very narrow amount of information, then that would be a really significant issue. The way that we tackle the problem is increasingly sophisticated audit capabilities. So as we're procuring newer systems, they are getting better at tracking the use and reporting on that. So that's what I was kind of hoping to come in terms of support, absolutely supporting Bernie in terms of the report and the work that we do very closely together, is that we are looking at our kind of development programs in terms of future capabilities that are better at this auditing. And similarly, our kind of cyber capabilities, you know, we're bringing through a business case shortly that continues to build on the services that we have, because it's one of those areas where the work is never finished. We're always having to respond to new and evolving threats. So just wanted to kind of add those points in support of Bernie.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Kelvin. And as you say, Bernie, this is also about culture and how we talk about it and where we talk about it. So yeah. Again, it just seems puzzling that it's increasing. Have we any sense ever that it is accidental? People haven't intended to access information.
So we have a small number of cases, but that is the case. And then the majority of the cases where people have actively accessed somebody else's information that they're not entitled to have. When we've gone back and looked, people have had legitimate access to the system from an access rights point of view. So, I always think of this, in our jobs, whether you're a nurse, doctor, administration, an employee of this hospital, you're in a really privileged position in terms of the information that is available to us. So this is people who've just been nosy, or have tried to use information for other purposes, and so in those senses where those have been investigated, those have been willful, under just culture, and therefore have gone through the full disciplinary process. The cases where it's not, it's very small, few and far between, where it's just been an accidental piece.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And normally those where it's accidental, people will report those straight away.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Alistair, you're wanting to come in because Richard was wanting, but I think he says he's had his answered already. So, Alistair.
Yes, apologies, I wasn't at the last quite. So a question about the phishing attack simulation, and then just a point, just to let you know what's happening with some of our junior doctors. It's interesting that 1 in 5 of our employees didn't pick up the phishing attack when it was simulated. That 1 in 5 of us could have allowed a virus or ransomware into our hospital, and I noticed that that's going to be rerun, and departments are going to be told how many people in their departments have succumbed to this phishing attack. But I just wonder whether you could get some more immediate feedback to each individual. So it's just somebody clicks on this ransomware, and then all of a sudden this this skull and crossbones comes up and said SITs have just phished you, please, and then puts you in touch with some training around phishing. It's just some immediate feedback about a phishing thing, which because that's the way that our cybersecurity will be broken, is because of human factors rather than because of the technology that's behind it, I think. And the second thing was that in terms of people accessing records and that sort of behaviour, I've had some conversations over the last year with our GMC local representatives, and we've had some training, and some the GMC have come to the Grand Round and talk to junior doctors around how you can get yourself into a lot of trouble by doing things that you think are reasonably innocent. And lots of these are around technology, it's around accessing things you shouldn't, it's around social media, and what you should and shouldn't be doing on social media. So I think we need a lot more of this, because I think it's going to become more prevalent. Just a comment and the question there.
Thanks, Alistair. Kelvin.
Yeah, on the phishing one, I will check. I mean, certainly when I've run these before, people going through to those next steps do then actually get taken to a training page. I thought we did do it in that way, but I will check to make absolutely sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, thank you. We have been asked to discuss and note the actions taken over the last year, and note the assurance that the risks are being robustly managed and the action plans and projects to mitigate risks are being undertaken in a timely fashion. We're asked to note the actions to fully remediate the Log4 Shell high severity alert may continue for some time, but are essential to reduce the likelihood of successful cyber attack. To note that trust staff accessing information without a legitimate reason to do so has increased over the year, and to note the actions being taken to address this. And finally, to approve the annual report. CIRO, sorry, I'm about to Senior Information Risk Officers report. So if colleagues could do that, please, and I'll ask Bernie to come on to item 17, the board assurance framework. And as you do, Bernie, I would note that the audit and risk Assurance Committee considered this at your meeting in March this year.
Thanks. Also, thanks, Mary. I'm just going to draw in Carl, because the main discussion at Audit and Risk was in relation to the new the long-term financial position. That risk wasn't approved at Audit and Risk and has been updated to reflect the feedback from the committee. So I will ask Carl to take the board through the key changes that were made in relation to that, and then I'll take the rest of the report as read. Carl.
Thanks, Bernie. There are two aspects of this particular risk, Chair and colleagues, around certainly operating within a deficit financial environment as set out currently in Steve's report, although of course we are working with regulators and our system partners to review that with an expected further update on our 22-23 plan either on the 13th of May or the 20th of May. The second aspect relates to cash, and of course operating within a deficit position draws upon the cash position of the trust, and at a point in time there may be a need to access cash support, but that is at this point in time a theoretical risk, obviously as set out, evaluated as such, but will be updated when we get to a point of signing and agreeing a final financial plan with both the ICS and NHSI, which will probably be now at the next board, private board, but also then put into the public domain in June. If I think that's July, sorry, the early July board meeting, late June Finance Committee. So those are the aspects that we updated, and it's probably trailed actually in the last 2 months board meetings.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Carl. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add from the Audit and Risk Committee?
We did have a really thorough discussion on this, but I think it's updated in the BAF, and that's really helpful clarification from Carl. But we understand that we're going to have to wait to see what our finances are once our funding's been agreed with the system and with our regulators, and then we'll have to consider. I think we all understand the risks that we're facing on the medium-term financial position.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there questions or any other comments? I'm glad you said what you said, Carl and Sarah, because I think we are highly aware of the potential risk to our position because of the financial situation, and we may well need to revisit this once we know. So, colleagues, we're being asked to approve the changes to the current board assurance framework following review with the exec directors and the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee, and to approve the new long-term strategic risk that's been developed by the Director of Finance and amended following discussion and challenge. Also, we'll be asked to note the current position on the top rated risks on our corporate risk register. Thank you for your responses, colleagues. Item 18, and just to note that I do have an additional item after item 22. It's brief, but just so people are aware of that. Item 18, if I could ask Sian, our company secretary, to introduce the Declaration of Gifts, Hospitality and Interests Policy and Register. This is a matter reserved for approval to the board, and standing orders require that the registers are presented to us annually. So thanks, Sian.
Thank you, Chair, and colleagues. This report is presented to you for two reasons. One is to submit some proposed amendments to the policy itself for declarations of interest, which has been reviewed by myself and the counter fraud specialist. It's been reviewed and scrutinised by Audit and Risk Assurance Committee and is recommended for approval to the board. The policy is within your packs with the track changes in there, so that hopefully you can see clearly, but they're also summarised on page 323 of your pack. The second reason is to present for information the registers of declarations of interest made by decision-making staff, both on the board and then the broader staff body, decision-making staff are defined by the policy itself. And I reported to Audit and Risk Assurance Committee in January, apologies, that we implemented a new process for recording interests last year. We moved from a paper-based process to an electronic process using an ESR module, that's the electronic staff record. And we've also significantly improved the communications and reminders to colleagues, so decision-making staff get an automatic reminder from ESR, and then there are at least biannual reminders from me, particularly around the holiday period as well, where staff might receive gifts. So having done those actions, we've increased the number of declarations, which is really good news, 12-fold. So we're over 100 declarations. That's not over 800 declarations. That's not 800 people. There may be multiple declarations per individuals, and I just wanted to report that to you because it's really important. It might seem quite functional and quite administrative or bureaucratic in terms of declarations of interest, but they are so important for us as a public body and as public servants within the NHS to be very clear where we might have interests, and to be transparent with members of the public, particularly for things like our procurement exercises if people have private practices through our clinical colleagues, and also in the gifts that we receive to make sure that we are compliant with our policy. So as I say, it's submitted for the board's approval in relation to the policy, which is a matter reserved to the board, and for your information in terms of the publication of the registers that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Sian, and I just want to endorse what you said about the importance of doing this, and hope that, you know, throughout the organisation people are aware of the importance of this. Often it is inadvertent, I know, but I think there's something for managers in making sure that their staff are aware of this policy. So thank you. Do people have other questions you'd like to comment on? No? In which case we're asked to approve the proposed changes, and as Sian says, you can see them there as track changes to the Gifts, Hospitality and Sponsorship and Declaration of Interest policy. That has come as a recommendation from Audit and Risk Committee, and to note the publication of the updated registers of interest for decision making, and the hyperlinks are in the report. So colleagues, if you could please approve that. I'm going to go on to item 19, and I have not received any questions raised in advance. So this is a starred item, and therefore we're going to note the report. Can I invite you, Bernie, as our Director of Integrated Governance, to reflect any additional risks you think we've noted during today's board meeting?
So I think the main thing in relation to today's meeting is the overall impact in terms of quality and safety, in terms of the current operational pressures. So we will review that as part of our ongoing review of our strategic risk on the BAF in relation to harm, and then the secondary element is in relation to the ongoing discussions around the operational planning and financial position, which again we will ensure are reflected in terms of mitigations actions in the existing strategic risk.
Thanks, Bernie, and that would include the SIP position. Yeah, thank you very much. Anybody? Steve, did you note anything different or additional? No, happy with that. Thank you. Kelvin, I'm just checking in my chat. For some reason it's got covered up by something else. Also confirm the response to Alice's question about the phishing attacks. They get taken to the YouTube video on phishing attacks. So you're right to say, Kelvin, that people are immediately taken through to some support and training. Thank you for that. That then brings us, I think, to item 21, which is the item where we invite our company secretary to read out any questions posed by members of the public, either in advance of the meeting or those joining on Teams Live. You have the protocol for that laid out in your papers. and we always lay aside 15 minutes for questions. So, Sian, could I ask whether there are questions and if you could direct them to the appropriate director? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are 2 questions. One was asked in advance of the meeting. There's one comment that I'll come to at the end. The first question is the question asked in advance by Stephanie Went, apologies, and she asks, I understand your staffing is at critical levels at the moment. Would you consider introducing free parking for staff who work for your trust? I understand that your trust charged staff to park throughout the pandemic when all other health authorities waived their charging, in line with government recommendations. I'm going to ask Carl, the Director of Finance, to answer that question. Thank you.
Thanks, Sian. We certainly recognise the challenges we've got on recruitment, and probably that's very similar up and down and the land, and we'll continue to consider parking related issues. There were at times, of course, through the pandemic that we did have in place free parking, and we're supported by organisations around Trellis that also allowed staff to pay to park on their land. The main problem we have, however, is that we have limited capacity on site, and certainly with the park and ride facility as well, we have to make sure that we are offering a fair choice for people that use the park and ride, as well as parking on site in terms of charges. So I think it was back in December 2020 or early 2021 that we did reintroduce charges for parking, but also linked to the fact that when we tested the ability for free parking across all staff, we created a major congestion both on the site and on the A390, and for the 2 days that the trial was tested, we know we had quite considerable problems with access for emergency vehicles, staff getting on the site and into work on time, so that at that time we reverted back to normal parking charges, commensurate also with the park and ride services that were available. Just to point out, we do still maintain free parking for staff that work purely shifts overnight, and that is per ongoing national guidance. And the one thing I think I would say is that we will continue to look at the car parking charges as we go towards October 22, where the opportunity is in place to review parking charges in light of new arrangements for the 2022-23 parking permits.
Thank you very much, Carl. That's helpful.
Thank you, Mary. Second question came through on the Q&A during the meeting. I'm going to direct it to Susan, our Chief Operating Officer. It's from Anonymous, and they ask, I've seen in social media lung checks for Cornish residents, but only Plymouth-facing people. Will others be invited? Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Sian. Yeah, I'm happy to answer the question. We were invited by the Cancer Alliance in Cornwall to run a pilot on early lung checks, and we launched it up in the north and east of the country, of the county, sorry. So we have a full case that's coming to our Ops board next month for the full rollout across Cornwall. We have to be really clear. We had to be really clear that we had the ability to do this. This is offered to high-risk patients aged 55 to 74. Primary care will then send them an invitation to where they're triaged, and they're offered a low-dose CT scan. And for all the reasons that I've explained earlier as part of the performance report, our imaging has been under significant pressure. So we trialled it up in the north of Cornwall, and we will hope to roll it out across the rest of Cornwall by the end of the year.
Thanks very much, Susan. And perhaps the board could be kept updated on when and whether that rollout happens, so that we have that information. But we're happy to take that by an email would be
so,
fine.
So the paper will come to Ops Board next month, Mary, and then we will take it up through the normal governance routes.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. And Shan, I think there were only 2 questions. Is that right?
That's right, but if it's okay, Mary, there was a comment which was helpful, which I have an answer to, if that's all right. So the comment was, it was a couple of comments actually from members of the public, just really would welcome seeing colleagues' names and job titles when they're speaking through the meeting. And Pete in our digital comms team has advised me that we've got some really great new kit that's only just come in, and hopefully for our next board in public, therefore, we'll do a little trial in June, but for our next board in public we can use that functionality, and so that suggestion it will be answered. So thank you, and thank you to Pete and Hannah in the digital comms team for their excellent support as always for the board. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed, and thank you for your comments to members of the public, because we really do value them. We miss seeing you, but it's great to be able to see you like this. And just while we are saying thank you to people, if I could add my thanks to Lindsay, which Shan gave me around the preparation of the report on the various gift policies. Bringing us then onto the evaluation of the effectiveness. What worked well? What could we have been better if we had done? Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. There's one bit I wanted to comment on which I think has worked very, very well, and I'd like to acknowledge Lindsay Neve, our Deputy Company Secretary. This is the first board meeting in which we've used our new fully electronic, fully integrated board reporting system, and I know there's been a huge amount of work in the background that Lindsay has led and coordinated, and she's had some great feedback, but I'd just like to say publicly that's had a very positive impact in terms of improving how we access our information. I think it's greatly assisted the way in which the board has worked, and to acknowledge Lindsay's personal leadership role in enabling that and progressing that.
Thank you for saying that, Steve. I couldn't agree with you more. And as one of the people who felt quite nervous about it, I can honestly say I think it's magic. I think it's great. How about whether we were consistent with our board etiquette and how we've contributed to patient safety? There's a number of people agreeing with Steve's thanks to you, Lindsay, so that's lovely. I think we've done well on our etiquette. I think a number of the items have contributed to patient safety. I guess I feel a bit funny at not having seen people so much this time, and I don't know what we could do about that really, but I feel we have had some really good papers and presentations, so thank you to authors for those. If there are any more comments, please indicate. Great. Alistair thinks it was good timing. That's nice. Thank you, Alistair. Okay. And so if there are no further comments, I promised you an extra item after this one, and if I could perhaps ask Steve to come in on that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. As board members will be aware, I note this in my Chief Executive's report under section 15, that Susan Bracefield, our Chief Operating Officer, is moving into a new role. So I just wanted to reflect on that for a moment or two, if I can. Susan's been a Chief Operating Officer for a number of years now. She joined the Trust in 2018 as part of our senior leadership team, initially as Deputy Director of Operations, and then later on taking on the interim and then substantive role as Chief Operating Officer. Susan's had a huge impact positively on our organisation throughout that time, and particularly so, Mary, in the 2 years in which we've been operating through the pandemic. That's been an unprecedented time of challenge for every part of the NHS and for every part of our trust, and particularly though for the role of Chief Operating Officer, dealing with really unprecedented challenges, situations and considerations. And that's been a huge impact on us. It's impacted every one of our leadership team. And I'd like to acknowledge Susan's approach to that and the impact, Susan, that you've had on our organisation. You've been a fantastic Chief Operating Officer. We're very sad to see you moving on, but very pleased and excited that the role you're going into is one which will continue to be a really important senior leadership role in our wider system. So if colleagues aren't aware, Susan starts as Chief Nursing Officer for the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Integrated Care Board. That comes into being in July, and Susan will be taking that role on. So as a board, we'll have other opportunities to say thank you and congratulations to Susan on the new role and farewell. But this will be the final opportunity in our public board meeting. So Susan, on behalf of all of our board colleagues, can I take this opportunity to say thank you so much for the impact that you've had. You leave a significant legacy of improvement in our organisation, and we're very grateful for that. And that has direct positive impacts on our patients, their families, and the people in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So thank you very much, and best wishes in the new system leadership role that you'll be taking up in July.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, Mary. It's sad to go, I have to say. It's been a good 4 years, it's been a challenging 4 years, and just thank you to all my colleagues on the board for all your support and listening to me have a whinge now and again. So thank you. And I'm sad to go, but not going too far. So thank you.
Well said, Susan, and I add my thanks, and I particularly note the style of leadership you adopt. It is very effective. And it isn't shouting, so it's a great style, and you've shown great leadership, and we really appreciate it. And I'm really glad you're not going very far away, because we will be able to continue to work together. And for the benefit of members of the public, there are lots of people who are very clever with graphics and computers, doing all sorts of sparkly things, saying congratulations to Susan. As you say, we will have other opportunities before you go to say goodbye, but thank you very much. We have our next meeting of our board in public on the 7th of July, and we are going to have a brief recess before we start again with our board meeting in private. If I could, always difficult to consult, isn't it, when you're online like this, but we're due to start that meeting at 2:15. Given the time that we're finishing, would you prefer that we start at 2, or indicate if you'd like to start at 2? If I don't get sufficient indications, I will go to 2:15. Okay, I'm getting some interesting graphics. Hooray. Okay, I'm going to call that majority. So please, could we reconvene, not on this link, but on the other link for board in private at 2 o'clock. And thank you everybody for your attendance. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.